Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the Shepherd of Black Sheep. As promised, we're going to go over Nick Reiner pleading not guilty today and what that means. And to do this, we're going to go over a Law and Crime Network video, and our buddy Tony Bruschi has another video about it. And that might be it, because in terms of the Nancy Guthrie case today, there's very little news, actually. The one thing I did hear is Sheriff Nanos has said that the media needs to leave the street. So they don't want any media on the street. That's what Brian Etten said. So that's going to make it more difficult for them to do their jobs because their cars have been their power source. So, I mean, and why would he even want them gone anyway? Well, there's a black SUV that went back into Nancy Guthrie's garage. People are speculating who was in that SUV because the garage door closed behind her. Maybe a member of the Guthrie family. I don't know. Nope. I'm only on time. Livin', thank you very much. Wizards are neither late nor early. One day she'll get it. Maybe not soon, but one day. Miss Kim, how are you? No hype, how are you? Just grifters left. Yeah, well, unfortunately. But let's see what Law and Crime Network has to say about Nick Reiner here. And what do you think about how he looks in the thumbnail? He kind of looks like a little antagonistic to me, really. Kind of like, nah. Nope, I'll make sure that we'll finish late again then. Let's see. Gonna wait for people to pour on in here too. How is everyone today? As you come in, make sure you remember to like the video. Likes are free. Like for the spirit animal, the fox, or my other spirit animal is an owl, the wise owl. They're probably my two favorite animals to see. Bald eagles are pretty good too. But also subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I go live every night, usually a little bit after this, 10 p.m. Eastern, but today a little earlier. And I talk about true crime and current events, and I use my experience with mental health, addiction, and narcissistic abuse to give my unique perspective on those things. And there's an awesome flock of black sheep here in the live chat. Sometimes they give me a little bit grief, but they're awesome people that are very welcoming. Come in and say hello. Hello there, Mavs. How are you? Yes, today we all talk about Nick. Because we talked about Nancy Guthrie almost every day for 3 weeks. The red fox. I love it, Ms. Kim. I've seen one in Pennsylvania once, and it looked like it had a secret doorway in the bush. Where is at the top of a retention pond, like, you know, those retention ponds and developments, and it kind of went through, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. I love seeing foxes. I see them all the time too. Hello there, Trisha. Welcome. Glad you found us here. Lakewood, California, in the house. And remember, folks, likes are free. Like for the foxes, like for the flock of black sheep. Super chats are a great way to get questions answered and to support the channel. Super stickers are a great way to support the channel. Memberships are a great way to support the channel. And I'm going to start doing some members-only live chats soon as well. But with that, let's jump in to see look at Nick Reiner here. I don't know. He looks kind of like confused and a little antagonistic maybe. But what do you think he looks like? Kind of like uncaring too. Like just, yeah. What did I do?
Mr. Reiner, do you waive formal reading of the complaint, advisement of rights, including armed forces and veterans' rights, enter a plea of not guilty, denying any and all special allegations, enhancements, and priors?
Yes, Your Honor.
A plea of not guilty is entered on behalf of Mr. Reiner.
Nick Reiner seen in court on camera for the first time since his arrest as he pleads not
guilty to his parents' murders, looking gaunt with a shaved head in a jail uniform. But what is even more shocking than his appearance is the case itself, as Reiner faces a possible death sentence if prosecutors choose to seek capital punishment. And did today give us a hint as to where his defense may go? I'm bringing on Johnny Depp's lawyer, Ben Chu, to talk about this very high-profile case of Hollywood meeting a courtroom. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime.
So this is Law and Crime Network. This is the other host, Jesse Weber. We normally listen to Chris Stewart. I really like him too. But make sure you check out Law and Crime Network's channel. I like them. They do good work.
Jesse Weber. Today was a big day in the ongoing legal saga of Nick Reiner. Okay, this has been a long time coming, this arraignment, because on Monday, the accused double murderer, Nick Reiner, appeared in a Los Angeles County courtroom for his official arraignment. It's been delayed in the past, on charges of first-degree murder with special circumstances in the killings of his parents, acclaimed film director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, on December 14th. Now, this isn't the first time that Reiner has appeared in court since his arrest. In fact, there were court sketches that were released of his first appearance in December, his initial arraignment date in January, but cameras haven't been allowed to show Reiner in court until today for his official arraignment, which again marks a major turning point in this horrific case. Remember, he faces these 2 counts of first-degree murder, and those murder charges include special circumstance allegations of multiple murders and that he personally used a deadly weapon, a knife. And if prosecutors decide to pursue a capital punishment in this case, that's why these special circumstances are so important. It could justify that. If he's convicted on these charges, it could result in a possible death sentence. Now, to be clear, as of now, there is no indication that prosecutors are going.
So that's a good question. If found guilty, would you think that the death penalty is what he should get? Just curious. So type 1 if you think you wish he did, if he's guilty. Press 2 if no, it should really just be a lengthy prison sentence, if not prison for life.
The death penalty route, although I will tell you outside of court today, it was reported that Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan Hochman emphasized again that this case is in fact, quote, death penalty eligible, and indicated they are beginning the process to determine if that is the punishment they're looking at here.
We will be looking at all aggravating and mitigating circumstances, and we have invited defense counsel to present to us both in writing and orally in a meeting any arguments that they would like to make in consideration for our going forward or not going forward with the death penalty. So that is an ongoing process. We will also, at that point, when we get all this information, it will be subject to not only a rigorous analysis, but many of the most experienced individuals in the DA's office with death penalty experience will be helping me evaluate that information.
But what we now know from Monday's arraignment is that Reiner's defense attorney, Deputy Public Defender Kimberly Green, has entered a not guilty plea on Reiner's behalf. And he, by the way, sat behind her with a glass partition separating them. And it's also worth noting, as I mentioned, that this arraignment has been delayed. I mean, one of the reasons is you had Reiner's previous defense attorney, high-profile criminal defense attorney Alan Jackson, withdrawing from the...
So it's pretty close in the chat between the commenters here. I think one more person said no, just a lengthy prison sentence. But several people did also think the death penalty is warranted too.
Case back in January. This was based on what he called circumstances beyond his and his client's control. And now a public defender has been put in his place. By the way, I interviewed Alan Jackson on my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live. Seemed to me, based on his answers, that he was suggesting that mental illness could be the route that he was planning on going as defense counsel, so possibly insanity. There might be something else there, although I couldn't confirm for sure. He wouldn't say it. He shouldn't say it. But based on his answers, that's what I seem to indicate. Mental health defense, insanity defense. Now, it is also worth noting that Reiner was not wearing a suicide prevention smock during Monday's hearing, which he had been wearing during his first appearance back in December. And while this doesn't give a full picture into his current mental state, it can maybe indicate what safety issues are present. It can indicate jail personnel no longer believe he is a harm to himself at this time, maybe. But I will tell you, just saw a snippet of Monday's arraignment. But right now, I want to play the entire hearing in court so you can get the full scope of what happened, including the moment Reiner actually addresses the judge himself. Take a listen.
How would you like to proceed at this time, counsel? The court has, and I'll just make a record, we addressed the request for media coverage off the record. Court just orders that there's no live streaming and no live transmission, and no filming of anyone in the gallery.
We'd like to go forward with the arraignment at this time.
Thank you. And on behalf of Mr. Reiner, do you waive full reading of the complaint, advisement of rights, including armed forces and veterans' rights, enter a plea of not guilty, denying any and all special allegations, enhancements, and priors?
Yes, Your Honor.
A plea of not guilty is entered on behalf of Mr. Reiner. Counsel's requesting
April 29th as 0:30.
April 29th, 2026 as a 0 of 30 calendar days.
He certainly does look troubled here. I mean, he looks a lot different than he did in many of those other videos where we went over him, where he's younger. He looks much older, honestly, to me, than 32 here, or 33, however old he is. Looks older. Certainly doesn't look well. We'll put it like that. You're like, if you were to see him, you'd be like, I don't know about this guy.
Yes.
And may I take a waiver from your client at this
Yes,
time?
sir.
Mr. Reiner, you are entitled to a speedy preliminary hearing. That's a preliminary hearing within 10 court days and 60 calendar days of your arraignment. Your arraignment is today. Do you understand, waive and give up those rights so that your matter may be continued to April 29th,
But here's the thing. So someone mentioned the medication change and how it can have a negative impact. But if he was indeed stable for 5 years on a certain medicine, okay, you do a change and it's not going well, go back on the medicine that was working. Who cares if you were gaining weight at that point or you had sexual side effects even? It's like, what's the alternative here? Get back on what was stabilizing you and then take it from there. Don't just continue on the thing that's not going well. If that's truly indeed what it was. And we don't even know if he was using or not either. He might have been using substances like meth on top of it. We just don't know. We need to see that drug test. As far as I know, no drug test has come back yet.
2026 as a 0 of 30 calendar days, with the understanding that your preliminary hearing may commence within 30 calendar days of April 29th?
Yes.
And does counsel join in that waiver?
I do.
The court finds that Mr. Reiner has made a knowing and intelligent waiver of his right to a speedy preliminary hearing within 10 court days and 60 calendar days, and that his counsel of record joins in that waiver. Defendant agrees that the next court date of April 29th, 2026 is a 0 of 30 calendar days. The matter is assigned to, for all purposes, by the supervising judge of the criminal master calendar. The matter is assigned to, for all purposes, to Judge Sam Goda in Department 108. Counsel reserve on bail?
Yes, Your Honor.
It's bail set at no bail. Anything further in this case?
Yes, for the record, Your Honor, people have turned over to the defense the large bulk of discovery. We are still awaiting word from the coroner's office that they've completed the autopsy report. As soon as we get it, we'll turn it over from the defense, as well as any other discovery that comes.
Thank you. Anything further?
Your Honor, I addressed with the court the issue of the outstanding SCTs. We're asking that those be withdrawn at this time.
And those subpoenas, as referenced by the defense, are withdrawn, ordered withdrawn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So here are the key takeaways from this latest hearing. First, Reiner's next court date is set for April 29th, where a judge is expected to set a date for his preliminary hearing. And at the preliminary hearing, the court will determine
April 29th, the next court date.
Whether there's enough evidence to head to trial, so we can expect prosecutors to lay out all the evidence or a lot of the evidence they have so far in this case, or from a legal point of view, enough to establish there's probable cause to move forward to trial. What we don't know is whether this hearing is also going to include cameras, so we'll keep a close eye on that too. Prosecutors also mentioned that they've turned over a large bulk of discovery to the defense, but they're still apparently waiting contact from the Los Angeles coroner's office on completion of the autopsy reporter reports. You know, from the preliminary autopsy reports that were previously released released into the media, we learned the manner of death for Rob and Michelle Reiner was homicide. Cause of death was multiple sharp force injuries. So I am curious what additional details the full final autopsy report will show and whether or not that will work towards the prosecution's favor, maybe give something for the defense. But I will also tell you this. The defense indicated they withdrew subpoenas, though it's unclear who was included in those. So you'd have to wonder if something changed. Maybe they don't need these witnesses anymore. Maybe something was provided by prosecutors. Maybe they're not going a certain strategy. Not entirely sure. But let's talk a little bit more about it now. Okay, so let me bring on a special guest, friend of Sidebar. Haven't seen him in quite some time. I'm joined right now by acclaimed trial attorney litigator, of course, famously represented Johnny Depp in his infamous trial. Ben Chu, good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time. First, any surprise today? I mean, not surprised that Nick Reiner pled not guilty, right?
No surprises today. I think he just said one word, yes, pleading not guilty. I don't think there probably will be many surprises at the next hearing either, at the preliminary hearing.
Well, they set a date, I think, for when the preliminary hearing is going to be. Let's actually take this step by step. Why would he waive a speedy preliminary hearing? Why do that?
My theory on that is I think they are getting ready, of course, to do the psychological analysis that will be necessary to plead insanity.
And so that...
So they're going to do this to try to plead insanity, and that's why he would waive the speedy process here to a preliminary hearing. Interesting.
Takes some time.
I think it does take some time. I mean, there is an issue here, as you know, Jesse, of resources in light of the California statute, the Slayer Act, that essentially deprives him of the assets that he would have otherwise inherited from his parents. Since the allegation here is that he murdered his parents, he doesn't have access to that, which is why, of course, he doesn't have Alan Jackson anymore.
I was just talking about it before about why Alan Jackson had to step down and due to some conflict beyond his control and his client's control. A lot of people have wondered whether or not it's about resources or money, but just because he's represented by a public defender, we did an episode previously about it. I mean, she's a seasoned attorney. The public defender's office sometimes gets a bad rep, but I did want to ask you about, we'll get back to the preliminary hearing, how he looked. Now, you ask me, in my opinion, he didn't look good. And when you look at that, it's not that he didn't just look good. If you are talking about a case of mental illness and trying...
And maybe this is part of the defense too, right? To make him look a little more unhinged here to help the not guilty by reason of insanity plea.
And understand why somebody would have killed his parents like that. His appearance in court today, how does that affect the case moving forward?
Oh, I think it has a big impact. I think, as you know from your own trial experience, I mean, the jury is going to be looking intently at him most of the time, and they're going to be making their own assessment of his appearance. And I think, we always tell our clients, whenever you're in the courtroom, there are going to be eyes on you. And I think, unfortunately, he looks the part of somebody who is severely disturbed.
Do you think that this is going to be a tough case to defend, not only legally, but in order to get a fair and impartial jury?
I think that courts generally, I think they believe that they can get a fair and impartial jury. I'm a big believer, as I know you are, in the jury system, and I do think they can be. I mean, obviously, the Reiners are extremely known and beloved in Los Angeles and probably throughout California and the country, but I do believe people understand the issue of mental illness, and I think they can weigh it fairly.
How much do you think Hollywood is going to be a part of this? There's been so much talk about the party the night before the Reiners were killed, and we always talk about the celebrity aspect of this. How much is that going to be a part of this?
It's such a good question. I think subliminally it will be a part of it, and it also, I think it'll be interesting to see what decision
I think they're going to struggle to get him not guilty by reason of insanity because, one, he did things that showed that he knew it was wrong, left the scene, he had that hotel room, and overall, it just seems a little bit like a pattern of behavior from him, but we'll see. I mean, we don't know everything yet, so when more things come out, I might change my mind on that, but right now, it's not looking good for him, in my opinion.
DA makes with respect to the death penalty. As you know, it's been 2 decades since California has put anyone to death. I think the last time was in January of 2006. And we all believe that people should be neither above nor below the law. And I think it would raise a lot of questions if, after all this time, California would be seeking the death penalty here. It would beg the question of, are you doing this because the victims here happen to be beloved celebrities?
Well, that's a good point. What do you think they're going to do? What do you think prosecutors are going to do? I mean, they talked about starting the process, emphasize this is a death eligible case. Do you think they move forward with that? They've already tried to highlight special circumstances like multiple murders and use of a knife. It's pretty horrific. You think they move forward with the death penalty?
I think that they won't. And I think perhaps because of the reason that it would really beg the question. I think there could be a real backlash there. And, you have a governor, of course, who's running probably for president. I think all of that, unfortunately, either will play a role or people will believe that it played a role, whether it did or didn't. But ultimately.
And again, I don't think he's going to get the death penalty. California doesn't even dish it out anymore. So it's not even on the table, in my opinion. What we're looking at here is either life in prison or life in a mental hospital. One or the other. Realistically, I think those are the two choices.
Ultimately, my guess, and it's only a guess, is that they're not going to go for the death penalty.
I want to go back to that idea of the preliminary hearing, and he waived a speedy preliminary hearing. There's a lot we don't know about the evidence they have against him, right? I mean, there's the surveillance footage. They talk about him checking into that Santa Monica hotel, what was allegedly found there. How much at a preliminary hearing will prosecutors reveal of the evidence they have? They don't have to reveal everything, right? It's just enough to substantiate probable cause. But how much do you think they're going to reveal?
I think they're going to hold some things back, Jesse, because as you know, all they need to do is show sufficient evidence to justify a trial. And I think they already have that. So I think they may play their cards close to the vest here, especially if I'm wrong and they do go for the death penalty. They may leave some things to later.
Did you get a sense of where the defense is going today or not really? I mean, what did we learn, right? They said that
not guilty by reason of insanity, of course. I mean, what else would they be doing with this at this point?
Apparently certain subpoenas they're withdrawing. They didn't say not guilty by reason of insanity. That's something that I think a lot of people suspect. Two ways to look at that, right? Insanity, not guilty by reason of insanity. Let's say you couldn't appreciate the wrongfulness of your conduct, didn't know what you were doing was legally or morally wrong, right? Or a mental health defense. If you're talking about first degree murder, some sort of mental illness negated an element of premeditation. Do you think that's where they might be going?
Good question. So, I mean, they might try to use the mental health aspect to sway the jury. But what do you think they're going to do? Not guilty by reason of insanity, or use mental health plus addiction to kind of sway the jury and the consequences a little bit? So type 1, if they're going to do not guilty by reason of insanity. Type 2, if you think they're going to use the mental health / addiction to make him seem not as culpable.
I do. And I think they're waiting for that to be completed. And that may also, affect the decision on whether to go for the death penalty. That could be an excuse or a reason for the DA to say, look, we're not going for the death penalty here because there is this element of mental defect, which I think clearly there is. And I think your point you made earlier about the...
And time out. It is one of the flock of black sheep's birthday today, Bethany. So everyone should wish Bethany, the birthday girl, a very happy birthday.
The court-appointed counsel is a very good one. She is excellent. And the fact that he doesn't have Alan Jackson doesn't mean he doesn't have an outstanding defense. And I think she was smart to keep her cards close to the vest today. So I don't think we learned that much today from her.
Do you think that would be a potentially successful defense? And I know you don't know all the evidence in the case or all the factors, but you're talking about somebody who reportedly was schizophrenic, suffered from substance abuse, had allegedly mental health issues. There was also this report that his medications were adjusted or changed.
Look at how much different he looks here than he does in this courtroom. I mean, how long ago was this? 15 years ago? How old do you think Nick Reiner is in this picture? 18? 19? It's only 13 years. It's been a rough 13 years for Nick Reiner. At least looks-wise. In terms of other things, I don't know. But it also seems like a pretty equal mix between people thinking not guilty by reason of insanity is what they're going to go for, or are they going to use mental health and addiction to try to assuade the jury to make it seem like he's not as culpable for his actions?
Before the killings, and I don't know the exact circumstances of that, but I wonder if that's something that's going to be explored and maybe could be successfully explored by a defense attorney.
Jesse, I think it will in as far as mitigation. I mean, for example, if they do go for the death penalty, I could see that being a reason for the jury to kick it down and not impose the ultimate sanction. So I don't think it's going to get him off the hook. I think a lot of jurors don't really believe that psychology is as exact as science as other sciences. So I think whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but I don't think he's going to get off the hook altogether. I think he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison.
And that's what I agree with. They're going to say all sorts of things, not guilty by reason of insanity, mental health or addiction played a part. But I think he's not going to get away with it. I think he's going to be guilty. And then it's just a matter of what the punishment is. That's what I think.
There's a lot of pressure trying a case like this, whether you're the prosecutors or defense attorneys defending it. Feels like a lot of pressure. Feels like a lot of eyeballs.
Oh, yeah. I think they're both under enormous pressure, probably more so the prosecutor, because the public has already, condemned Reiner for the death of his parents. So I think the public is expecting a guilty verdict. So in a way, Reiner's counsel really has nothing to lose because she's supposed to lose this case.
Well, I don't know. We're still in the early stages. I'm very curious to see what happens with this. I wanted to ask you that considering there's a lot of pressure in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, let me tell you. So it's good to hear your perspective on this. Ben, thank you so much for taking the time. Always appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me anytime.
That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can also check us out on NBC's Peacock. We have our episodes up there as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.
So that's really it for the Law and Crime Network video. Now, Tony Bruschi has another editorial on this.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
Nick Reiner walked into a Los Angeles courtroom this week, sat behind a glass barrier in a brown jumpsuit with his head shaved, and spoke exactly 2 words when it mattered. Not guilty. And I can already hear the reactions. How can he plead not guilty? We know what happened. His parents were found stabbed to death in their bedroom. He was arrested the same day. There's allegedly security footage. Witnesses who saw him at a party hours before documented a history that leads like a roadmap to tragedy. How did this happen? Well, if you've been following any court cases ever, you'll see a trend of people who are clearly guilty of a crime pleading not guilty. So
yes, Tony Bruschi is very right. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of his video here, please remember to like the video. Likes are free. Like for my spirit animal, the fox. Please remember to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I go live every night at around 10 p.m. Eastern to talk about true crime and current events. I use my experience with mental health addiction and narcissistic abuse to give my own unique perspective on those things. And most importantly, awesome flock of black sheep here in the live chat. Come in and say hello. There's a lot of good vibes here. And thank you very much to everyone who's liked already and who has subscribed to the channel and all the support I've been getting.
what's he doing? What is the play here? That's what we're going to get into. And I'd love to get your thoughts in the comment section on Substack and YouTube as we work our way through it. The links to get there are in the descriptions. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi on YouTube or hiddenkillers.substack.com. Here's what most people don't understand about the plea. It wasn't a defense. It was a door. And what's behind that door, number one or two, is the real question we should be asking. Because not guilty in a California courtroom doesn't mean what you think it means. Not in a case like this. Not when mental illness is going to be the centerpiece of whatever comes next. Let me explain how this actually works. In California, you don't just walk into an arraignment and announce that you're pleading insanity. That's not how the system is set up. If you want to pursue a not guilty by reason of insanity defense, you enter what's called a dual plea. And you plead not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity at the same time. And then something interesting happens. The court splits your case into two separate trials.
So this is Tony Bruschi. It's Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Everyone should check him out and his content. Subscribe to his channel. I like him. He has some good opinions on the matter, and he brings on guests like Jennifer Coffindoffer. She's a former FBI agent, a psychologist, Dr. Siobhan Scott. I really like her too. I'm in talks to get her on the channel as well. She's the redhead.
Phase one is about guilt. Did you do it? The jury decides that question first, and during that phase, your mental state isn't even part of the conversation. You're presumed sane. If they find you not guilty of the act itself, you walk. Case over. But if they find you guilty, if the jury decides, yes, you did in fact do this thing, then and only then do you move to phase two, the sanity trial. That's where a jury decides whether you understood what you were doing, whether you knew it was wrong, whether your mental illness was severe enough to excuse the act you've already.
And so the reason I don't think he's going to get away with insanity is because, as I spoke about with Dr. Z, so much of his behavior is more character disordered and personality disordered, narcissistic. And it might be more of the vulnerable narcissism where he had the covert grandiosity and entitlement and is exploitative of others and had impaired empathy, right? That's why I don't think he's going to be able to get away with it. Because if everyone who had NPD or a personality disorder was able to get off with not guilty by reason of insanity, then so many people would be. But since that's not the case, people with a personality disorder do not get that. That's why I don't think it's going to work for him. Now, also to note, 25% of the cases where someone pleads not guilty by reason of insanity, they actually get it, which is a pretty high amount if you ask me. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Already been found to have committed. Two trials, two separate questions, guilt first, sanity second. So when Nick Reiner stood in that courtroom today, or the other day, and his public defender said not guilty on his behalf, that wasn't him claiming innocence, that was him preserving options. That was a placeholder. Well, the defense figures out which door they're going to walk through. And there's really only three available. Door number one, let's see it, Bob. It's a brand new insanity defense.
Tony Bruschi, the game show host, with let's see what he's won, an insanity defense.
Not guilty by reason of insanity under California's McNaughton standard. This is the one everyone thinks about when they hear insanity plea. And it's also the hardest to pull off, Bob. Here's what McNaughton requires. You have to prove the burden is on the defense here, not the prosecution. That the moment you committed the act, you either didn't understand the nature of what you were doing, or you didn't understand that it was morally wrong. It's a high bar. It's not, I was having a mental health crisis. That's not, my medication was off. That's complete detachment from reality. Believing your parents are demons, thinking God commanded you to do it.
And again, that's what a not guilty by reason of insanity plea requires. You have to not know the nature of what you did or not know the difference between right or wrong. It has to be one or the other. I don't think he's going to be able to meet either of the criteria, which is why I don't think he's going to get not guilty by reason of insanity.
Not understanding what a knife does to the human body, that sort of thinking. And here's the problem for Nick Reiner. Hours before his parents were found dead, he was at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party. Multiple sources reported that he argued with his father there, got into it with Bill Hader. Witnesses described him as disruptive, acting strangely, interrupting conversations. But he was arguing, he was engaging, he was present enough to disagree with people about things. Legal experts have already weighed in on this. Former prosecutor Nima Rahmani, who's been on the show many a times, put it bluntly, if you're capable enough to have an argument with your parents at a Christmas party, you're not legally insane. The standard requires total psychosis, thinking your victims are aliens, complete inability to distinguish right from wrong. Having a bad
I agree with Tony there. I agree.
night at a party doesn't meet that standard. Professor Lori Levinson at Loyola Law School said the insanity defense is actually really tough to win. It depends entirely on what experts say about whether the defendant had a mental disease or defect severe enough that he didn't know what he was doing or didn't know it was wrong. That's the bar, basically. Nationally, only about 1% of criminal defendants even attempt an insanity defense, and of those, most fail. So if full insanity is there, it's a long shot. What's behind door?
Now, I don't agree with that because I've heard different things. I've heard of the people who try it, more get it than you would think. So I'm not sure where he got that number from.
Number 2, Bob. Well, this is where it gets even more interesting and honestly more likely. California abolished something called diminished capacity back in '82 after the Dan White case. You might know it as the Twinkie defense, even though that's not actually what happened. But that's the story for another day. The point is, California voters were so outraged by the verdict that they eliminated diminished capacity as a full defense. Here's what survived. Here's what could be behind door number 2. Mental illness can still be used to challenge the specific intent required for first-degree murder. First-degree murder in California requires premeditation, deliberation. The prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant planned the killing through and through, acted with specific intent. If the defense can show that Nick Reiner's mental state at the time, his schizoaffective disorder, the medication change reportedly made a month before the killings, whatever was happening in his brain that night prevented him from forming that specific intent, the charges could be reduced. Not dismissed, but reduced. First-degree murder becomes second-degree murder or voluntary manslaughter. The death penalty comes off the table. Life without parole becomes life with the possibility of parole or something less. Former Judge Halim Deandra, who's both prosecuted and presided over cases in California, said directly, "That's not really what we have here, in my opinion," when asked about the full insanity defense. But you could have a situation where illness can reduce the crime from murder to manslaughter. This is almost certainly the real play, not a...
I doubt that's going to be the case for Nick Reiner. He's not going to be able to get this reduced from murder to manslaughter. That would be a shock. And that would be a lack of justice too, by the way. Also, after this video, Conan O'Brien has broken his silence. I'm very curious to hear what he has to say.
Acquittal, not freedom, but changing the name of what happened and the consequences that then follow. Then, of course, there's door number 3, which is different from the other 2. Mental incompetence to stand trial. What does that mean? Well, this isn't about Nick's mental state on December 4th. This is about his mental state right now. Can he understand the proceedings against him? Can he participate in his own defense? Can he communicate with his attorney and make decisions about the case? If the defense argues he can't, if they claim he's too mentally ill to even stand trial, that triggers a whole separate process. Psychiatric evaluations, hearings, potentially months or years of treatment at a state facility until he's deemed competent enough to face the charges. It's a delayed tactic, but it's also a legitimate question in some cases. At Nick's first court appearance back in December, he was wearing a suicide prevention vest. Attorney Mark Garagos noted publicly that this was a red flag for competency issues, which apparently come up frequently in parricide cases. We don't know yet whether the defense will raise this, but it's a door that remains open if the price is right. So where does all of this leave us? Well, DA Nathan Hochman hasn't decided whether to seek the death penalty yet. He said publicly he'd only pursue it in rare cases, but the special circumstance allegation, multiple murders, use of a deadly weapon, makes Nick eligible if prosecutors choose to go that route. The psychiatric evaluations are ongoing. Reportedly, Nick has been meeting with medical professionals who are assessing his mental state at the time of the killings. Their testimony will be central to whether defense to whatever defense.
And again, I'm very curious what the toxicology report's going to say, as well as what they are going to say to the people that interviewed him. That'll be very interesting. I would like to hear that.
Emerges here. The preliminary hearing is set for April 29th. That's when we'll get the first real look at the evidence. After that, depending on motions and delays and the complexity of the mental health issues, it could be a year or more before this goes to trial, if it goes to trial at all. Because here's the thing about cases like this, they often don't.
Mark Garagos, he doesn't think it's going to go to trial, and we're going to see why in a little bit too.
Plea deals happen, charges get negotiated, families express preferences about outcomes. The prosecution weighs the optics of putting a severely mentally ill defendant on trial for his life. We don't know what the Reiner siblings want. Jake, Romy, and Tracy haven't made public statements about the case. The family has said only that they have the utmost trust in the legal process. Not much to go on. And I'm going to speculate about what they're feeling or what they want to see happen. They've lost both parents in the most horrific way imaginable, allegedly at the hands of their brother. Whether they're going, whatever they're.
So allegedly, the Reiner family is distancing themselves from Nick Reiner in his defense, and honestly, understandably so. Even considering what Rob Reiner thought about these kinds of cases, and he wasn't for the death penalty. He's the one who said everyone in jail or prison who's committed a violent crime had a terrible upbringing, to which I disagree with Rob Reiner on that note, as with my friend Dr. Salerno as well. But as a human, if you have siblings and one of those siblings kills your parents, it's like, dude, like I wouldn't like that one bit either. And it's like, what kind of person would really be like, okay, I'm going to really get behind my sibling here? Probably not. The only way you might even think about it is if one of those parents was extremely abusive or something and essayed the kids, and then they did it in retaliation. Okay, maybe then. But unless something like that's happened, I wouldn't think the Reiner family is going to get behind him.
Going through is far more than most of us can really comprehend. I think the question that needs to be asked, the question that's going to define this, is how people react as this case unfolds. What does accountability look like when someone is both sick and choosing to stay sick? Nick Reiner had resources most of us can only dream of. According to reports, he went through at least 18 rehab facilities over the years, all paid for by his parents. He had access to psychiatrists, medications, treatment programs, interventions. His family put him under a conservatorship in 2020, the legal arrangement that gave a court-appointed guardian control over his medical decisions, including psychiatric medications. The conservatorship lasted a year. When it ended in 2021, sources say he went back to his old patterns, resisted authority, refused to follow programs, considered the whole arrangement beneath him. In a 2015 interview for that film, Being Charlie, film about addiction, based loosely on his own experiences, Nick said the rehab programs hadn't worked for him. I just couldn't get by in these programs. I had resistance every time they tried to reach me. Yeah. Rob Reiner, his father, said at the time, when Nick would tell us that it wasn't working for him, we wouldn't listen. We were desperate, and because the people had diplomas on their wall, I want to throw up every time I read this. We listened to them.
And again, that's where Rob and Michelle, I think, were a little bit naive. I think in this case, I don't always agree with professionals, but in this case, if they were telling Rob and Michelle, your son is being manipulative and is deceiving you and lying to get more drugs, I think they were right. And unfortunately, it seems like Rob and Michelle were a little bit naive about addiction, about personality disorders, and about mental health, because you have to realize, what version of that person are you talking to? Are you talking to the version of them that just wants to use more drugs? Because if you are, that version of them can't be trusted. And any addiction professional worth their weight in salt would be able to tell you that. But again, for some reason, Rob said, well, we're going to listen to Nick. And I don't think that was a good choice.
When we should have been listening to our son. I think about that quote a lot, and I throw up a little bit in my mouth every time. A father blaming himself for not listening, for trusting the experts instead of his kid, for trying too hard in the wrong ways. And now that father's dead, allegedly killed by the son he spent decades trying to save, manipulated by that little monster. If the defense successfully argues that Nick's mental illness is his schizoaffective disorder, his medication issues, whatever was happening in his brain prevented him from forming the intent required for first-degree murder, what does that mean? It means the legal system will have found a framework for what happened, a category, a name. But it doesn't answer the harder questions, the one that families dealing with addiction and mental illness and dangerous relatives ask themselves every day. When someone has every resource available and refuses every intervention, when they resist every attempt to reach them, when they reject the help that might have prevented tragedy, how do we hold that? Mental illness is real.
So if you want more perspectives on it, check out my interview with Dr. Z. We talked about the Nick Reiner case for about 20 minutes in my interview with her. Go check that out. She's a specialist on narcissism.
Affective disorder is a serious brain condition that affects cognition, perception, mood. Medication changes can trigger episodes. None of that is made up. And also Nick Reiner, by his own account, resisted every program, considered being under someone else's authority beneath him, valued his freedom over his stability. Both things can be true, the illness and the choices, the disease and the refusal. This legal system is going to try to sort this into categories: first-degree murder or second-degree murder or manslaughter, legally insane or legally sane, competent to stand trial or not. But the reality is messier than any of those categories allow for. 2 people are dead. A man who made some of the most beloved films of generation, and a woman he loved for 36 years also dead, found in their bedroom with multiple stab wounds. On the first night of Hanukkah, hours after a Christmas party where their son caused a scene. And their son walked into a courtroom, slumped in a chair behind glass, and let his lawyer speak 2 words on his behalf: not guilty. That's not the end of the story. It's barely the beginning. April 29th, preliminary hearing. The psychiatric evaluations, expert testimony, legal motions, and eventually, maybe, a trial that will force the jury to answer questions that don't have clean answers. What did Nick Reiner understand on December 14th? What was he capable of knowing? Did he plan this? Or did something in his brain break in a way that...
That's what's insane is December 14th. That's only a little over 2 months ago. Doesn't that seem like forever ago now? But it was 2.5 months. It's wild. Wild how time just can go by fast, but seem so long ago at the same time.
Erased planning from the equation. And underneath all of that, the question the legal system can't really touch. What do we owe people who refuse to be helped? What do we owe the people they destroy? 2 words in a courtroom today, a lifetime of questions behind them. your thoughts in the comments section on YouTube or our Substack. The links are in the descriptions. And leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're finding our reporting valuable, we greatly appreciate that. Take us with you on the go. Press subscribe, whatever platform you're listening to us on, so you don't miss any of our coverage of any of the cases that we follow for you right here. Looking forward to your feedback on this and where you think this is going. We'll continue the conversation.
All right, so that was Tony Bruschi. Make sure you check out his channel. Now, Conan O'Brien breaks his silence. It's a short video, but we'll see what they say.
The son of legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner due back in court this morning. 2.5 months after prosecutors say he stabbed his parents to death inside their Los Angeles home. Nick Reiner now potentially set to enter a plea after the judge in the case delayed his arraignment for a second time when Reiner's defense team stepped down.
Pursuant to the law in California, Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder.
They've skipped his print that. His trademark print that, Alan Jackson.
Reiner spoke openly in the past about his struggles with addiction and mental health, and at some point before the murders had changed or adjusted medication he took for a serious psychiatric disorder, according to 3 people with direct knowledge of the case. Just hours before their murders, Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle attended a holiday party hosted by Conan O'Brien, bringing their son Nick along with them, where 2 people familiar with this situation tell NBC News the younger Reiner became disruptive.
It's so awful. It's just so awful.
O'Brien opening up about the loss of his friends in a new interview with New Yorker Radio.
To have that experience of saying goodnight to somebody and having them leave and then find out the next day that they're gone, I think I was in shock for quite a while afterwards.
Not surprising to be in shock for quite a while afterwards.
Outside of Reiner's iconic catalog that spanned multiple genres, from When Harry Met Sally to Stand By Me to A Few Good Men,
You can't handle the truth.
O'Brien also praising Reiner's decades-long work outside of Hollywood in charity and philanthropy.
To have that voice go quiet in an instant is still hard for me to comprehend.
Now, as Nick Reiner faces 2 counts of first-degree murder, legal experts say his mental state will be a critical factor.
If there is an issue with competency, that could further delay this arraignment. It means that he doesn't have the ability to move forward in the legal process.
Now, the charges against Nick Reiner include what's called special circumstances, making them even more severe than a standard murder charge. That means
But we can also go to the New Yorker in a minute, too. That's where the full interview is with Conan.
Heard a lot about Conan O'Brien's party, right? Night before the killings. Nick was reportedly interrupting guests, asking them, are you famous? Got apparently into a fight with Rob, his father. The prosecution and the defense, I feel, can work with that in different ways, right? If any of that comes in, if testimony comes in, how does it help the prosecution? How does it help the defense? I know it's still the early stages because, by the way, we don't even know a lot of what the prosecution's evidence is against Nick Reiner, and we don't know what the defense is. But how are you looking at that? How are you previewing it?
Well, I don't know if you played it in your package. I don't know if you guys are too cheap to give me a monitor that actually reflects what you're doing. But the fact remains, if you took a look at his eyes and his face in that courtroom today, even though it was only momentary, and you looked at the amount of weight loss, they've obviously...
This is Mark Garagos on the right. And this is Jesse Weber, the guy from Law and Crime Network, too. So News Nation. News Nation is killing it in the true crime, by the way. And even though Ashley Banfield isn't doing her show on there anymore, she is still a guest, and they do have her name still in their description apparently. But Ashley does her own YouTube channel first and foremost now. But of course, Brian Etten also with News Nation.
Calibrated or adjusted his medication, which is one of the things that there was some early reporting, I think, by my podcast partner, Harvey, that that was one of the reasons they had changed the medication in the first place and he had ballooned up. You look at his eyes, it does not take a court-appointed 987 psychiatrist to tell you this is somebody who is still seriously in the throes of a mental health challenge.
Well, first of all, that's 100% right. I think that's clear from seeing him, and I think that was the value of seeing him. Number two, you're lucky we give you a background. I mean,
So the difference really is Jesse Weber we're lucky we give you a background. But where does a mental health issue mean you are no longer responsible for your actions? That's the $1 million question, because not every mental health issue is insanity. So where's the line? Where's the line between, okay, there's a mental health issue, but then where are you also responsible for what you do? What are your thoughts on that in the chat?
we don't have the money for a monitor. My gosh, I mean, that
Do
was something.
you, do you know how
something to
much?
say.
Do you know how much time your producers spend getting me the right background on this thing?
Honestly, I was a little
spend a
distracted.
buck or
It
two.
looks great. It looks phenomenal. It looks really good. It's one of the best I've seen. So okay, I'll give him that.
But by the way, it's an upgrade from the Dan Abrams one they used to make me use.
I know you used to use that. We
guys
all
are
missed
making
Dan, and
progress.
I called you out. I was like, I like the Dan
Yeah.
Abrams background. I got to get you this one. Before I let you go, all seriousness, do you think this is actually going to end up at trial, or hey, they have to see what the discovery is before they even talk about a plea deal or anything like that?
No, I don't think this is going to end up at trial. Look, I could be wrong, but I will tell you, I have handled these cases. I've actually got one now, but completely different circumstances. These what are called parasite cases. I will make a prediction, a bold prediction as to what will happen. He's being housed in Twin Towers right now. You saw him in that video, that short video right now. At some point, there is going to be a doubt as to his competency. At some point, I'd be willing to bet the prediction markets he is going to go back to Atascadero, which is the state psychiatric hospital. They will get him grounded. They will get him calibrated. Then what will happen? He'll come right back to Twin Towers. He will disassemble and disintegrate again, and then we'll be right back into it. I've had one of these cases. In fact, I talked to the DA just recently on the other case. The guy still hasn't gone to trial, and it's 12 years later.
You might be 100% right about what's happening here. Mark Garagos, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Can't wait to see your background next time, but always appreciate you staying up late for me. Thanks.
Thank you for watching.
Oh, Chris Cuomo snuck in there. So remember to like the video, please. Likes are free. Likes help my spirit animal, the fox. And please subscribe to the channel if you're not already. So I think like someone can be sick and it can explain someone's actions, but there does still need to be some sort of punitive measure, because I guess, Brian, what are you saying? You think it should not be prison and it should be mental health facility? Is that what you're saying?
When people talk to me about it, I say, well, all I can do is come out of my own personal experience, which is this isn't inspiring a lot of chuckles for me. Now, there's a different thing where you can, I think there are comedians who, when they talk about Trump, they quickly get very angry. And I've said this before, but I think it's possible to surrender your best weapon. Your best weapon is to be funny. If it just evolves into name calling, I'm all for people trying. And when there's a really good joke about the president or the administration, if there's a joke about the right or the left, and it's a good one,
they're going political here. But I mean, he should be in prison. And okay, you get psych treatment in prison. Okay. I mean, I don't disagree with that.
related. So I just think that in the current climate, it can be, things have gotten so stretched out. Think about that Dolly melted watch that it's hard to find purchased. You know what I mean? It's hard to get a grasp on what's the straight line here. And
where does the network get involved? Do they?
There's always some issues. I've been dealing with networks for most of my life. So there'll be stuff, and then that's when you roll up your sleeve and you start arguing back, and it can be.
Do you win?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can win. You can also lose.
But on what basis? Are there rules, or is it just human persuasion?
Certainly, there are rules about what can be said and what can't be said. The Academy has rules. The Academy has rules about what you can do with the image of an Oscar or can't. I mean, everyone has rules. Once you've lived in New York for a period of time, you come to this awareness that, everything ultimately is a New York co-op. They have their rules. They have their, you can say, hey, but on this other award show, I got to do this.
Right.
And but you're living in, let's say I'm going to make it up. I'm living at 172 West 89th Street. And they'll say, and it's a place called, and
by the way, this is the New Yorker YouTube channel. Go check them out. I'm not that familiar with them, but that's who this is from. And of course, this is Conan O'Brien. So for those who don't know, the very few of you who don't know, that was one of the last places people saw Rob and Michelle Reiner alive, because they were all at a party. Now, to Rob Reiner's discredit, he invited Nick Reiner to the party and asked Conan, can Nick come? And they said yes. But considering his mental state at the time, or if he was using, I don't really think it was a good decision to invite him along to that party. But what do you think, chat? Do you think it was okay to try to include Nick? Press 1 if you think so. Press 2 if you think no, of course not. They definitely shouldn't have invited him along.
This is the Drake. This is the Drake building. And we're, you live here at the Drake building. Yes, I do. What I'd like to do is put it in my kitchen window. No. We don't let people alter the windows here at the Drake. And you'll say, okay, well, it's funny, when I lived over at the Macklemore yes, we know, that's the Macklemore. And
so it's okay for Nikki Glaser and Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes.
Yeah, every award show probably is like, that's fine for the People's. And I'll say, I once did the People's Choice Awards. And, yes, we know. That's the People's Choice Awards. They don't have standards. Their windows and their kitchens are horrid. You're now. And so it's not just the Oscars. Every show probably feels that way about the other shows.
Ever since the Will Smith incident, the slapping incident, and when we were kids, you had the streaker incident.
And by the way, I didn't know about this until a little earlier, but there was an incident at the BAFTAs, which is basically the Britain's version of the Golden Globes or the Oscars or whatever. And there was a person with Tourette's that when 2 black people were on stage, he screams out the N-word. Go check this out if you haven't seen it already. But it caused a big stir, and some people were defending the guy that has Tourette's. Others were saying, no, he should have known better anyway, and he blah, 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 blah. So, interesting. But it certainly gave some attention to that BAFTA.
Do you worry about the kind of unplanned disaster happening?
No.
Really?
I'm someone who likes, I don't want anyone to slap me.
But you'd like a streaker.
I'd like a streaker. And you know what I'd really like?
Yeah.
A streaker to slap me. That would satisfy. That would just satisfy so many of my dormant Catholic hangups.
I would imagine.
It's a weird duality here. It's a weird thing, but I like to plan and I like to prepare, and then I love it when something goes off the rails.
Like, for example,
Because-
give me an example in performance.
Oh, just for years and years doing my show, if accidentally a light falls, you can make a whole show about that.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? People, I don't know what it is about human beings, but they instinctively know when something is real and of the moment. And then
So imagine this guy, he probably has Conan O'Brien on the show, and he's like, I know the big moment is I want to ask him about the party that Rob Reiner was at. I want to talk to him about this. But he has to kind of make it seem like, no, that's not the only reason why I'm having him on here. Got to talk about some of this other stuff first. But meanwhile, we know this is really what I want to talk about.
when they see you react in real time like a human being and make something funny out of it, or even just slightly humorous, that has 10 times the value of anything you could have written. So you have to be open for things to slightly go wrong, and it's fun and electrifying. So my whole life has been prepare, but then, like any good quarterback, be ready for the whole play to fall apart and then wing it. And
Scramble.
That's a beautiful thing. Scramble.
Do you do that too as a comedian? To what degree are you you're not like you are at home or at dinner. You're a heightened you, or you're.
You know what?
There's a
This
performance
is so
aspect
funny
to it.
you say this. I'm always this guy. I mean, there's a heightened me, but it's really not that much different. And I can go into, I mean, I routinely will just talk to people on the street, complete strangers, and then that will lead to me doing a bit and trying to get them into it. I'm trying to do improv with random people on the street, and I've been maced.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's unwanted improv, but I think it's glandular. I think it's, I mean, I'm joking, but I'm also not joking. I think my father, who was a very smart man and very analytical and a scientist, he was looking at me once, and he watched every late night show, and he said, "Oh, I see. And he wasn't making a joke. He said, "I see you're making a living off of something that should probably be treated." And he wasn't joking. He said, "You have this, I see your synapses and the rhythm of your circulatory system, and what you're doing is, and so, yes, and then you found a way to be compensated. I see." I thought, thanks, Dad.
But you also treated the death of your parents in some way, comedically, therapeutically, humanly.
Good segue here by this guy. A wily interviewer. Segue from his parents dying into, speaking of death, what do you think about Rob and Michelle Reiner?
I wonder if you could tell that story.
I was shooting my travel show for HBO, and I was in Austria when I got the word that my father had passed. My brother Luke called me, and he said that Dad was gone. And so I took a van to another van to the airport, got on a flight, got on then another connecting flight, made it back to Boston. And you go through all the intensity of that. And then there was a moment where I was just outside my house, my family house, the house I grew up in Brookline. I got this lovely text from Will Arnett, and he said, "We're all thinking about you. It's in the news that your dad, we've all heard the news." And he said this lovely text, and this is just how we all are with each other. He does the podcast with Jason and Sean, Jason Bateman. And whenever we're together, we always just joke about Bateman, because that's just what you do. It's like the showbiz thing. And if I'm with Bateman, we joke about Will Arnett. But so I get this lovely thing from Will Arnett. He writes this lovely note, and I just wrote back, "I blame Bateman." And then he wrote, "Oh, I guess we all have our coping mechanisms for," and I cut him off and say, "Jason Bateman killed my father." That's just insane. But it's, make of it what you will. That's what I said.
I think your father had it right. I think he had it absolutely
exactly.
right.
My father had it right. Somewhere a ghostly father was perched on my shoulder saying, yes, this is it.
Exactly.
See, so the story gets more remarkable because 3 days later, my mother passed in the same room that my father had passed in. They had beds in the same room. I've laid out now that I have space for comedy still. So Will texts me right away and says, and not right away, but he texted me after, he said, if you want, I could have Bateman take care of your sister. And
underrated Jason Bateman movie, by the way, The Breakup with Ryan Reynolds, which actually a pretty underrated movie, an underrated time of film there between, what was that, the late 2000s to early 2000 teens ish. Funny movie.
And I immediately texted back 3053 Beacon Street, apartment 17F, make it look like a robbery. And because I knew my sister Kate, she would find it was funny. And
there's only 14 minutes left in this whole thing, so they're saving it for the back end.
And so he read all that on the air, and people were just like, "Oh my God!" And it kind of went viral. That is how I communicate. That is, I'm a whale. He's a whale. We make these weird noises at each other. That's how we communicate. And I know how much I love my parents, and I know what a lovely person Will Arnett is, and Jason Bateman, but none of this is real, but it's this way of doing business and connecting. And when they all came out that I had thrown Kate under the bus and said, go get her, this is where she lives, and make it look like a robbery, she texted me and said, you don't think I could take Bateman? It's like, very good, Kate. Thank you. But that was her immediate
and the
reaction.
funerals hadn't even taken place yet.
No, they hadn't. But so I don't know.
So Brenda asks a good question. Do you think families are sometimes blind to a family member's mental illness? And sometimes, I think sometimes people don't want to think that, especially when addiction is involved too. They'll be in a little bit of denial about it because they'll think it makes the family look bad. And this is especially true of narcissistic families. Image is very important. So they'll sweep problems under the rug and they'll act like everything's fine because they don't want to have this big issue. They want to pretend like everything's okay. But not all families are like that, of course. Some people try to really address issues. And this used to be more of a thing years ago. Years ago, there was more stigma around addiction and mental illness. There's still some, but just not nearly as much as there used to be. So I think today people are more likely to address things. And online, it can actually be the opposite in terms of people are more likely to identify with some kind of label. Oh, I'm autistic, I'm ADHD, I'm bipolar, I'm this, I'm that. And it might even have gone too far in that direction now to an extent. But again, I'd rather have people have the awareness than not have the awareness. That's my personal take on it.
What does it all mean? I definitely know it's, I am 100% Irish. I do think this is how we, and there are different communities maybe, or there's different genotypes, or I don't know what you want to call it.
When did you recognize this in yourself? How old were you when you started speaking whale speak or comedian speak and recognized this inbuilt irony, whatever it is, as a way of being in the world?
When you're a kid, I think we all do this. You go through your checklist, you emerge into the world. It takes a bunch of years just to figure out what the hell is going on. And then very quickly, things start to get sorted out. Am I an athlete? No, I am not an athlete. Do the girls go crazy for me? No, they do not. Am I a math whiz? No, Conan, you are not. Am I a tough guy? Oh God, no, Conan, you are not. And it's a lot of no's. And then I hit this thing where I would make people laugh in class. I wasn't the class clown. I was very quiet, but I would make friends laugh. And I started writing little plays and putting myself in them, and they were funny. And then in creative writing classes or in English class, I would write funny stories. The teacher would have me read them, and everybody would be laughing because I put a lot of comedy in there. There's this one arrow in my quiver. There's not 35 arrows in my, there's one. So I think I started, probably working this comedy thing unconsciously in what, 1972.
And Brian makes a good point. Something we used to address more in terms of the Nick Reiner case is a longer term mental health stay where you can be committed against your will, for lack of a better word. And at the very least, for other people's safety, just like the person Irina on the North Carolina train and in Nick Reiner's case, if he could have been in a facility, even against his will, maybe Rob and Michelle Reiner are still alive. And some people get a little queasy with that against your will part, but it's about the safety of everyone else and even the health of that person. So I do think something like that should be in place, but there just isn't right now. In California, the longest you can be held is 72 hours, I think.
1973 in Brookline, Mass, in a playground. And then you're just working it and working it and working it. And then I started seeing things on television or in the movie theater. And you're learning about rhythm, just learning about rhythm and what's funny and why is that funny. And I never got too analytical about it. I thought instinctively that way, that's like the part of the map that disappears and there's dragons there. Like, don't get into analyzing it. Just what's funny, what's not funny, which leads to, as I said, I'm really paying attention to the rhythm of Warner Brothers cartoons, the classics. The rhythm is perfection, the comedy rhythm of those great Roadrunner, Coyote cartoons, a really good Bugs Bunny, and the timing and the expressions, it's all perfect.
Let me ask you about late night. The big news about late night this past year was Jimmy Kimmel and Trump and all that. But I think we can agree that what's happening over time certainly is that the whole late night scene, and especially being watched in real time, that's collapsed, or it's in the process of collapsing.
Yeah.
I mean, Conan is no dope. I mean, he knows this is his first public appearance. People are going to want him to talk about that, and they're dragging it on to not talk about it.
Yeah.
How much do you care that it's collapsing?
Well, there's the sentimental side of me that grew up watching Carson that liked that. But I have a very ingrained wariness of sentimentality. When I sort of Google Earth out of the whole thing and try to look at the whole picture, I realize that things are constantly changing. Look at all the things that are changing all the time. And so people are saying this is tragic. And you're like, well, I've said this to Stephen. I'm close with Stephen.
Is Stephen Colbert treating it as a tragedy or what?
Well, I think Stephen very rightly is
pissed.
He's pissed, I think rightly, but I think he's got a big staff and he cares about those people, and that I've been in that situation, and that is excruciating. And so I think he has all the appropriate feelings. What I've tried to tell him is that there's so much of this really that doesn't have anything to do with you. I mean, I think it largely, these giant glacial plates are moving, and you are doing the best you can. And you're such a talented guy, and he's done an amazing job. And yeah, there is definitely a thumb on the scale. We all, more people now, either through the podcast or the travel, a multitude of other ways to connect with people and be funny and be satirical and be I had the situation where I was knew Rob and
sad, but it's not an absolute shock. It's not a tragedy in the sense that when we were much younger, somebody died in an accident or a disease or something. You had something happen this year to two friends who had been guests at your house the night before.
So notice they didn't even start talking about it until 23:44 of a 29-minute interview. That's very intentional. They wanted everyone to have to watch the whole thing.
Reiners.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience of that horrific tragedy?
Well, just it's to have, I mean, I had the situation where I was knew Rob and Michelle, and then increasingly got closer and closer to them. And I was seeing them a lot. My wife and I were seeing them a lot. To have that experience of saying goodnight to somebody and having them leave and then find out the next day that they're gone. You know, we talk about, I think I was in shock for quite a while afterwards. That was just, it was, I mean, there's no other word for it. It's just very, it's so awful. It's just so awful. And I think about how Rob felt about things that are happening in the country, how involved he was, how much he put himself out there. And it's to have that voice go quiet in an instant is still hard for me to comprehend.
You know, I watched that Mel Brooks documentary that Judd Apatow did. It's terrific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's Carl Reiner, and they have such a close relationship when they were, you know, both in their, I guess, 90 until Carl died. And then Rob Reiner pops up in this, and he seems, you know, relatively young and so vibrant and alive. And to have that in the back of your mind as you watch this film, for me, it's tragic. For you, it must be, I don't know, it's incomprehensible.
These people are so larger than life, especially if you've grown up watching them or appreciating their work. I mean, I just keep mulling over the body of work.
And again, he probably has to be careful here how he speaks, because he might be on the stand if there's a trial. So he can't maybe speak as freely, and he probably has a lawyer already to say, hey, what should I say and not say in my public appearances, right?
I think it's 7 movies that Rob Reiner made in quick succession that are classics. Now, to be thought of as a great director, I think if you can make one great movie, that's impressive. It's just it's an almost impossible feat. To make 2 means that you're one of the greats. To make 7 in like a 9-year, 10-year, 11-year period is insanity. And so, you know, with Spinal Tap alone, if that had been the only thing he ever did, he influenced my generation enormously. I mean, that was in comedy, Spinal Tap, when it came out, I was in college, and it was like seeing the, you know, it was splitting the atom moment. You have those moments where, you know, you see something truly remarkable. And another person I'd put in that category is we just lost, which is incomprehensible. We just lost Catherine O'Hara, and that's someone who was perfection, you know. And there is a tendency sometimes when people eulogize or remember, we've all had that feeling where someone's being eulogized, and we're thinking to ourselves, no, they were good, but this person's kind of laying it on thick. Catherine is just, who's a funnier performer than Catherine O'Hara? And what people didn't get to experience personally was she's possibly the nicest person I've ever met just glowed and goodwill. And, but here I am on a podcast talking like this is, unusual. This is what we're all contending with.
Yeah.
We're always in the process. It is something you don't think about. If you're lucky, you don't think about it for the first couple of decades of your life. And then it's people saying, did you hear? And you walk around concussed for a week. So that's what it is now, I guess.
Yeah.
I was in a good mood when I got on this podcast.
How you feeling now?
And you've taken me, this is the worst. I mean, this is a colonoscopy right now. And there's been no propofol.
See you again in 5 years. That's the best thing you can hear at the end.
You didn't use the right camera.
Yeah, sorry. We're going to have to do it again.
1955 Hasenblad. You jammed it up there.
Yeah, slowly. Conan O'Brien, thank you.
Well, always nice to talk to you, sir.
Good to see you, man.
So that was it. They had so little to say about it. And probably because Conan's lawyer advised him to not say anything about it, if I had to guess. And overall, they only talked about a dark topic there for 5 minutes. The rest of it was just Conan talking about not much. Certainly not much. But if you're still here, please remember to like the video. Likes are free. Likes are for my spirit animal, the fox. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I go live every night to talk about true crime and current events. Use my experience with mental health, addiction, and narcissistic abuse, narcissistic family systems, and cults to use my own unique experience to talk about true crime and current events. Awesome flock of black sheep here in the comments as well. Again, it's Bethany's birthday, so wish her a happy birthday. And in terms of the Nancy Guthrie case, the only things to update you on that, and if you want, I can play Brian's videos on it right now because there's literally nothing. There's just 2 shorts. Well, for one, when I played Smash Brothers as a kid, I always used Fox as my character. But overall, I've just always liked foxes, and I see them all the time. And some people never see foxes, but I see them all the time. Melly, what's shaking? So we'll play some shorts from Brian Etten just because we can. He's got a new video out too, but we'll see.
Hey guys. Hola español. ¿Qué están haciendo? No comentario. No comentario. Gracias.
No trespassing.
Hey guys, so we just got an Hey guys, so some interesting things happening at Nancy Guthrie's house right now. Several unmarked SUVs showed up. One of them actually pulled into the garage, and then they closed the garage door once the SUV was inside the garage. And there are people dressed in like suits, and some people sort of not as dressed up, but there are some people dressed in suits which we haven't seen before. They were walking around the outside of the house, and they're inside the house right now, and I can see some of them through the windows in the front in the doorway. They appear to be investigators, feds, but we don't know for sure. The cars are unmarked. What I found to be very interesting, though, is that the one SUV pulled into the garage, and they closed the garage door, and then so we don't know if there was someone in the car that they didn't want us to see, they didn't want the media to see. That's kind of the first thing that went to my mind. I mean, is it a member of the family that wanted to go inside the house? We don't know, but they've been in there for a while. Again, they were walking around the back of the house, and they're now inside the house, and I'll keep you guys posted. Hey guys, so some interesting... Hey guys, so an update from outside Nancy Guthrie's house. It's quieted down since earlier when, law enforcement was here. I've confirmed at least one of them was a Kima County Sheriff's detective. FBI, I believe, was also here. But something new, so Sheriff put out a new release basically saying that all the media is going to have to leave the cars. Like they're putting a no parking zone ordinance in for this entire neighborhood, basically, like a really big area where you're not allowed to park on the street or
A no parking ordinance for the whole area. And that's a problem because they use the cars for power. So what are they going to do? Buy a generator?
you'll, I think it's a $250 fine, and they're gonna, have the sheriff's deputies out here enforcing it apparently starting tomorrow, which is kind of interesting because first they put these cones out all along the street or these barricades so that, like they said, that way the media can just stay on that side and we'll keep the traffic moving, which there really isn't a lot of traffic. It's just kind of a quiet street, but so it's pretty clear they want the media to leave. Most of the neighbors who I've met have been
Hot Ham, you made me chuckle with this. She says, but Etten will get airlifted in every morning at dawn, I imagine. I can just picture him being like lifted the way they would carry like cows or horses and like dropping them down.
Like happy that we're here. Honestly, it might sound kind of weird, but like this one lady I talked to the other day was saying, like, we love Nancy and we feel like if you leave, everybody's going to forget. So I know that there's probably some neighbors that have just been annoyed that there's so many cars in their neighborhood parked all day. So I don't know what we're going to do. Like they're just putting the no parking ordinance in effect, but they're not saying you can't actually be here without a car. So we may try to figure out how to do that, although it'll be hard without a car because that's where we get our power. Although we may get a generator. So all the media is kind of trying to figure out what they're going to do next. So that's kind of like the latest development, but I'll keep you guys posted. All right, bye. Hey guys, so an update from outside. Hey guys, just wanted to give you an update outside Nancy's. It is Wednesday night, day 25. The latest that I'm learning, remember all the activity outside the house today. We know now that there were some prosecutors, there were people in suits along with the law enforcement outside the house. I'm now learning those are prosecutors, which is interesting. Not totally unusual. Sometimes prosecutors want to tour a crime scene before it gets released back to the family. What's interesting, though, is NBC News is reporting, and I'm always kind of interested in the NBC News reporting because that's where Savannah works, and obviously they're quoting sources, NBC, that law enforcement is about to turn the house back over to the Guthrie family. Which would make sense maybe why they were doing one final sweep today. FBI, prosecutors. I know that there was a Pima County homicide detective that was out here. So that may make sense. In terms of why that one SUV went into the garage and the door closed and we didn't see who was in it, I still haven't been able to piece that one together. So that's the latest from out here. We're just kind of packing up. I was telling you guys the situation where we're not going to be allowed to park here anymore starting tomorrow. It seems kind of like a way that they're trying to just get the media out of here. And again, it's weird because a lot of the neighbors really like us because they want to keep the story alive. They knew Nancy, and then others honestly have said they just feel safer just like with a presence out here right now because of like everything that happened. But anyway, nonetheless, they say they're going to fine anybody who's parked out here, I think $250. So we got to figure out our plan for tomorrow. I'm going to try to still find a way to be outside the house, but I'll keep you guys posted. All right, good night. Hey guys.
So I do think, as I said yesterday, Sheriff Nanos, I think he's doing his best to control the narrative because whenever Ashley Banfield reported that Tommaso is a suspect, Brian Netton reports that the Nest Cam footage is from multiple days, Sheriff Nanos goes out of his way to contradict them to try to control the narrative. And I think it's because Sheriff Nanos wants to be the one to announce big news. I think he's a little narcissistic. Add that to what former Undersheriff Rick Castiger said and the former union leader. They said Sheriff Nanos is spiteful, vindictive, has a big ego. I mean, what do you all think? It sounds like it to me, right? And again, some people would like to think, oh, that wouldn't happen to someone in his position. They're better than that. It's like, no, they're not better than that, actually. They are there's narcissistic people in every position. Literally every position.
Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my show. I really, really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. I appreciate all the support. It is day 25, which I can't believe, in the search for Nancy Guthrie. A lot of updates in today's episode. First of all, there was a lot of activity outside of Nancy's house today and inside the house. So before he gets into that, please remember to like the video. Likes are free. Likes are for my spirit animal, the fox.
So if you like foxes, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and come say hello to the flock of black sheep in the live chat here. Awesome people, great vibes, good times.
Homicide detectives I've confirmed, FBI, and perhaps family, which is something I'm still trying to sort out, that showed up to Nancy's house today. We have drone videos, so I'm going to walk you through everything that happened, but it's the most activity I've seen at the house in quite a while. What that might mean in terms of the investigation, I'm going to get into that. It's like super sunny today, by the way. It's probably one of the hotter days since I've been here. Also, the Cajun Navy is here. I interviewed their incident commander, who is kind of frustrated because he says they want to help search, but they don't want to do it without the permission of the sheriff. And he says the sheriff's office just flat out is pretty much ignoring him, is what he told me. So you'll hear from him in this episode. And then finally, I have a former FBI hostage negotiator who I'm talking to about this whole theory that this is a Savannah stalker. This is someone who was obsessed with Savannah Guthrie, who has now taken her mom, and why he believes that could be the case, and things that he has seen which makes him think that's the case. Really a fast.
Interesting. I haven't heard much about that theory. Do you think it could be a stalker? Savannah Guthrie has a stalker that maybe did this? I think it's maybe a little more deep than that, but I'm not ruling it out. But what do you think, chat? Do you think it could be a stalker of Savannah Guthrie? Press 1 if you think so. Press 2 if you think no, it's something else.
Fascinating conversation, kind of disturbing, but really, really interesting to hear his theory on the whole thing. So I'm going to get into all of it in this episode of Brian Enton Investigates. Hey guys, all right, so it's day 25. I'm outside Nancy Guthrie's house. I'm going to go through the updates with you from today. There's a lot of action outside the house, and I have a lot of video that I want to get you to kind of explain to you how it happened in real time. Kind of came out of nowhere, where first there was this white pickup truck that showed up, which I think is the locksmith that we saw last time. But then there were several darkly tinted SUVs that showed up, and you can see this group of what I believe is law enforcement. Some people thought maybe they were prosecutors because they're dressed, you know, they're very...
So it looks like a few people think it could be a stalker, but more people think no, not a stalker. So these are people in suits here, and there was a black SUV that went into Nancy Guthrie's garage and then closed behind her. And if they're opening up this house to the Guthrie family, wouldn't be surprised if it's a family member.
Dressed fancy, right in front of Nancy's house. They were looking at the doorway, the area where we saw the blood. They were really focused on the front of the house. Then they walked around to the side of the house, a group of them. We had our drone up. They were in the back of the house and on the side of the house. And then there was this other black SUV that showed up. That this was what really interested me. Went into Nancy's garage. They opened the garage, the SUV went in, and then they closed the garage. And you could see some of the people who were here who, I know at least one of them was a Pima County homicide detective, I'm told.
Who do you think was in the black SUV? Annie Guthrie? Savannah Guthrie?
They were outside the garage. Then they went inside. They closed the garage. And we weren't able to see who got out of that SUV. That was especially interesting to me just because I haven't seen that happen before. Like, is there someone that they didn't want us to see going into the house? My first thought was maybe a family member that just didn't want to be on camera with all the media outside. We just don't know. But they went in. The group was in the back of the house, as I was saying, near the guest house. You can see them out back. They were walking around the back. They were walking around Nancy's patio, around the backyard. And then we saw the black SUV came out of the garage. They opened the garage, the SUV left, and then the series of SUVs all kind of like sped away pretty quickly, sort of like a convoy of them. But again, I don't know who was in the black SUV that went into the garage. We don't know why they were not wanting us to see who was in that SUV. And when they sped by, I tried to look in the windows, but they were just so tinted that I couldn't see inside. So it was interesting. It was clearly investigators who were out here. The reason that they came out today, we don't know. It's interesting timing one day after the $1 million reward that Savannah put up. And I haven't seen that many investigators out here at once in quite some time. So it certainly caught my eye. Something else interesting is the United Cajun Navy is here. Their incident commander was out here talking with us today. His name is Josh Gill. And he's from, they're an organization out of Louisiana, I believe. And he says that he came here because he has a group of volunteers that all want to help search, but they want to do it with law enforcement cooperation. They don't want to just do it without getting.
So by the way, JLR and his channel, what does he even do? Whenever I even stop by there, it's like just, he's not even on the camera. He's just filming towards something. But he gets hundreds of thousands to over 1 million views doing that. And I guess like sometimes he goes in his car places or like asks people questions. I mean, to me personally, I clearly prefer Brian Netton, but I'll be curious what people get from watching him.
The blessing from law enforcement and some direction too of an area that they would want them to search. But he says the sheriff has been ignoring them essentially, and he's been trying to get in touch with the sheriff. So again, his name is Josh Gill. I wanted you to hear my conversation with him. What is happening with the sheriff? I mean, I guess you're asking for permission to search?
Absolutely. So the way our organization works is we come in falling under the command and control of the local law enforcement. And the last thing we want to do is self-deploy or go in without any permission and then potentially contaminate a crime scene or an investigation.
And what has the response been from the sheriff?
None.
Like any communication?
Very little. So the only communication I've had as of yet was I called the PIO yesterday and said, hey, we've got opened up a tip line, and that tip line we're receiving tips. If you would like to get
the blessing from law enforcement and some direction too of an area that they would want them to search. But he says the sheriff has been kind of put up.
I want to press to see who's talking here because it's important.
And I haven't seen that many investigators out here at once in quite some time. So it certainly caught my eye. Something else interesting is the United Cajun Navy is here. Their incident commander was out here talking with us today. His name is Josh Gill. And he's from, they're an organization out of Louisiana, I believe.
So Josh Gill, organization out of Louisiana.
And he says that he came here because he has a group of volunteers that all want to help search, but they want to do it with law enforcement cooperation. They don't want to just do it without getting the blessing from law enforcement and some direction too of an area that they would want them to search. But he says the sheriff has been ignoring them essentially, and he's been trying to get in touch with the sheriff. So again, his name is Josh Gill. I wanted you to hear my conversation with him. What is happening with the sheriff? I mean, I guess you're asking for permission to search?
Absolutely. So the way our organization works is we come in following up.
So I bet you though, if I were to go down there, I could do a better job than that. And I would have more of a background in these kinds of things than I think he does. So I probably should.
Under the command and control of the local law enforcement. And the last thing we want to do is self-deploy or go in without any permission and then potentially contaminate a crime scene or an investigation.
And what has the response been from the sheriff?
None.
Like any communication?
Very little. So the only communication I've had as of yet was I called the PIO yesterday and said, hey, we've got opened up a tip line, and that tip line we're receiving tips. If you would like to get them directly, we can link you up with that tip line. And they said just email them to them. I did have a conversation at the same time on who we are and what we have to offer, and there was really no interest.
Is that unusual in your experience?
It is.
What normally happens?
Usually the law enforcement will be able to have a conversation with them further on what we can do and provide them with an operational plan.
So he's saying right now that Sheriff Nanos is not cooperating with his volunteer group, which is rare. And what does that mean? To me, it's all about him not wanting to give up any kind of control in the case. It doesn't seem like he wants them to even find her at this point. I don't know, but what do you think? Why would he not want his group of volunteers to help, especially when other law enforcement groups and other sheriffs and police chiefs, they work with him. They work with these volunteers, but Sheriff Nanos does not. Why do you think that is?
And I understand these guys are extremely busy. It's a high-profile case. I did send them an email today offering our assistance and lining out an operational plan, how we can help.
And what would you like to do if they said yes?
Fall under their command and control and fill in the gaps. Basically, we're a force multiplier. We're additional boots on the ground. We do have thermal drones. We've got subject matter experts when it comes to search and rescue. We've also got K9 teams that are well qualified and have a lot of experience as well.
So if they gave you a big area to search that they haven't been able to get to, you could do it.
Absolutely.
It's kind of so interesting they just are ignoring you. You think they would at least have some dialogue like, hey, now's not the right time, or let's talk in a week, or you know what I mean?
Sure. Totally agree with you. And they are extremely busy. I know that they're getting a lot of tips, they're receiving a lot of information, and they've got to filter through that. We just want to sit down 5-10 minutes. That's it. Talk about our organization, what we have to offer, how we would integrate into their operation, and provide some professional services.
And so how long will you wait?
I'll wait as long as it takes.
So you're just waiting now?
Absolutely. We are gathering some tips as well, and coordinating with some other volunteer groups that are here, and trying to get a good operational plan together. Again, I have sent something to the sheriff's office that delineates and lines out a complete plan.
And if they give the go-ahead, how many people could you have here?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer. A lot. I could have enough to start scouring the ground, utilizing grid searches, grid patterns, and have them thoroughly done.
I mean, hey, what are the cons of letting that happen? I mean, can you think of any, chat? What are the cons of letting his group do that at this point? At this point, when, as far as we know, they're no closer to finding anything about her.
So we'll see what happens in terms of the Cajun Navy, and if they end up making contact with the sheriff, I'll kind of stay on top of that. Also, I was at a Mexican restaurant last night in Tucson, which is one of the places that Savannah Guthrie went with her mom in that Today Show segment. Remember when Savannah came home and they did a segment, this was several months ago, with her mom. They went to several different places in Tucson, including this Mexican restaurant downtown. And I was talking to them last night, the people who work there, and they were saying that law enforcement has been in touch with them since Nancy went missing, trying to see if there was anything unusual when they were there shooting the segment. Any people who were watching Savannah closely, anyone that they got creepy vibes from, which I thought was interesting because it goes back to this theory of, could this be like a Savannah stalker who is behind this? Someone obsessed with Savannah, trying to get to her and using her mom to do that, which I think is something that we have to consider based on what I've heard. And I think it's something that the FBI is considering they're going back to some of these places that she went with her mom and asking if there was anyone showing any like creepy behavior. Also, you would imagine behind the scenes, they're probably going through Savannah's emails. And when you're someone of her caliber and fame, and you're on TV every morning on the Today Show, you would imagine she has had stalkers and people who have sent her inappropriate emails and tried to reach out to her and contact her and that kind of thing. So I would imagine that's part of the investigation now. I spoke with Phil Andrew, who is a former FBI agent and was actually a hostage negotiator, and to see what he thinks about this theory, which was really interesting. And he also zeroed in on some of Savannah's videos that she's made, which is something that I've talked to you guys about too, that she seems to try to sound almost sympathetic to the person who took her mother, which may go, and remember, it's the FBI helping her make these videos, which may go back to this theory that that they believe it could be someone who is like a crazy fan of Savannah, like a stalker fan. So I want you to hear my conversation with Phil. I'm joined now by Phil Andrew, a retired FBI special agent and hostage.
Well, remember, two things can be true at once. Somebody can grow, but unless you know someone in person, you don't really know them. Understand that too. You can see what someone presents on camera, but that can be completely different than how they are behind closed doors.
Negotiator, it's good to see you again, Phil. I want to first ask you about the reward, since this just happened. Savannah Guthrie posting the $1 million reward. Apparently she wanted to do it earlier, but was told to wait. Do rewards typically, and you've worked so many cases, not just like this, because this one's so unique, but similar. Do rewards typically make a difference? I mean, do you think it will in this case?
They do. They do. One, they help keep this in the media cycle. So it's in people's consciousness. And there's hope that someone still sees that video and the uniqueness of the gait, the movement, the clothing, the eyebrows, that could break someone saying, hey, I think I know who this is. Also, somebody that might be close, a compatriot, or sitting on this information, it might shake them loose, because sometimes people's motivation changes over time, and we do know that money can be a motivator. But it's really important to keep this in front of people because it doesn't look like there are strong leads.
Yes, it doesn't look like they're strong leads at all. I agree with him. Now, behind closed doors comes from how we talk about narcissistic people, right? Narcissistic people are great at presenting a certain persona in public a lot of times. They'll act super generous and helpful, and they're very caring and kind. They might even try to volunteer and help out, especially the communal narcissists. But when it comes to getting narcissistic supply, anything that helps them get narcissistic supply, and hint, YouTube videos and gaining millions of subscribers and super chats certainly counts as narcissistic supply, by the way. But so when that's the case, anything they do could and should be questioned at that point. And then those narcissistic people, that very same person that looks like they're great in public, could be completely abusing and mistreating people behind closed doors that really know them. The fact of the matter is, unless you see them behind closed doors, you just don't know. And it can be extremely crazy making for the victims of people like that because everyone else thinks they're so great. Oh, and so take, for example, an addict that cleans up their act. And everyone else thinks, oh, they're a great person. They cleaned up their act. They're clean for so many years. And then behind closed doors, they're a piece of shit to their family. And the family's thinking, oh my God, all these people out there think this person's great. Meanwhile, they're treating me like trash. So it's really invalidating to them. So again, I'm not saying that's what's going on with JLR, but what I am saying is, unless you know him behind closed doors, you don't really know him. I'll stand behind that.
When I watched her latest video, and really with all of them, there's a sense that she's trying to like communicate directly with the person who's responsible in like a very gentle way, almost like an understanding way. And the way I've thought about it is almost like if it could be someone who was obsessed with her, who she's trying to kind of level with. What do you think about that? Because we know that they've gone likely. I mean, what I'm hearing is the FBI has, gone through her emails and, trying to see, someone with her sort of notoriety and fame has, a lot of people out there that are probably a little crazy, that reach out to her. I mean, what do you think?
No, I'm congruent just as I am in front of the people. I am behind closed doors. There could even be people here that know that, by the way. But if what I said about people like narcissists offends you, then I don't want you here.
Think about that theory that could be what's going on here, that could be the person responsible.
I think your instincts are right. And, having sat with families at these really, really painful, difficult moments, and sometimes over, weeks and months, the reality is she is speaking directly to the abductor. And you can see it. And she is leveraging that kind of empathetic and personal approach. And it's a very important part of this. And it's a very difficult part of it. Now, you can't be, you just can't be sensitive enough to how difficult this is for her and her family to speaking to the world.
And here's another clue to see who's disordered and who's not. Who can't tolerate one disagreement? Who can't tolerate any kind of criticism of someone they like? That person? What kind of person's like that? Narcissistic people that are hypersensitive to criticism and perceive criticism. They hear one thing they don't like and they lose their minds and run away. So pay attention to that.
To really reach potentially one person. And this one person has a lot of control in this situation. And I think that you're onto something too, that a theory could be that this is somebody who has a deep emotional connection, unilateral, of course, that she would not have necessarily met this person, or they were in a group and they just would not be noticeable to her or her mother.
So I've been away from home for a while for work, and one of the things I miss so much are my Factor meals. They make it so much easier to eat better, and Factor is a sponsor of today's video. Factor doesn't just ask you to meal prep because they've done the work for you, and it's real food. Factor's made by chefs and designers.
That's what this could be about, almost like we saw with Hinckley and, the attack on Ronald Reagan, to get the attention of Jodie Foster.
Would this person want to hurt her mom?
Well, that part is unclear. And I think it's important. And this is what I would say, even if I was working this case and sitting with the family, and I'd say it now, that we don't have any evidence that she is, she's deceased. And I think it's important not to come to any conclusions. Time can make us more anxious. Time without more significant leads becomes very frustrating and requires more patience. But the reality is we've seen cases, and they're rare, but we've seen cases resolve. And we just don't know enough. There are just too many anomalies with this case to be able to say with any certainty what's happened. So it's really important to be following through with the greatest level of fidelity with every technique to try to resolve this safely.
I don't know if you've seen this segment from several months ago, but Savannah came back to Tucson and kind of like a trip back to her hometown. And she was with her mom for much of the segment, and they went to different spots in town. And one of them was this famous Mexican place that I actually went to last night. And the waiter was telling me that, he remembers when they came in, it was a big to-do. And that since then, law enforcement have reached out to the restaurant trying to see, was there anyone strange that showed up or anything weird that happened when they were filming their segment there, which leads me to believe like they're obviously looking into this stalker theory. If it is a stalker or someone obsessed with Savannah, would there be some evidence that they could find? Like, would it likely be someone who had tried to reach out to her before?
Potentially. And that's why they're taking these steps. So to sort of recreate the last, even potentially few years from fan letters, from email, from, folks that have maybe signed up or shown up in places that could have been meet and greets for her, as well as something like this where, and
again, it's I wouldn't want to diagnose anyone just from a video either. And again, like what I accept about myself doing YouTube is there will be people that like me, don't like me. People might say I'm all sorts of things, but I do know I'm on the spectrum. If people want to say other things, they can. People are entitled to their opinions, but I've learned to just let it flow off your back. That's what I try to do.
Restaurant is used and, very, very close to locals. And there isn't any kind of discrimination of who could be close. So recreating those and understanding who could have been there, finding pictures, even personal pictures, somebody that was just there. And as she walked by kind of, by the rope where she's going in with her mother, that might have caught people in the background. And, when you have more time, when there isn't the urgency around chasing leads, you really can be much more methodical and go back and do a deep scrape of these kind of engagements where there might be a video, a recollection, somebody that, well, I didn't think that was relevant until they were asked.
Yeah, just something that stood out. That was a little strange or something like that.
Exactly.
I keep thinking about this. It's like 40 or 41 minutes that we think the suspect or suspects were in the house, from the time that the camera was disengaged to when her and
remember, like Maureen was saying in the chat the other day, just because there's 41 minutes from the time the camera was disconnected and the pacemaker was disconnected doesn't mean they were in the house for 41 minutes. They might have only been in the house for 5 minutes of that 41 minutes. We just don't know. Now, maybe other Nest Cam footage from the Nest Cams that we don't know what the footage was, maybe that tells a different story. But we don't know. Just because there's 41 minutes there doesn't mean he was in the house for 41 minutes. Or the multiple people, which it could have been, were in the house for 41 minutes.
Pacemaker disconnected. I just keep wondering, like, what may have been happening for that amount of time.
Yes. Well, look, I've got some unique and personal insight into that, having been an actual hostage myself. And, in 1988, there was the first school shooting in America. and the perpetrator took hostages. Happened to be my childhood home, and it was over 90 minutes of my mother, father, and I being held at gunpoint, and no one knew what was going on. And the reality was, we were in dialogue, we were negotiating. I was able to negotiate, my folks' release. I was later shot in an attempt to disarm her, but until I literally recovered and was able to share my story, no one knew what happened for those 90 minutes, except for, my mother, father, and I, and then for the minutes that they were gone. So this could be, and I might, surmise, it could have been dialogue. It could have been trying to convince her of something, or dialogue about moving with her.
What do you think that could have been about? The dialogue that these guys could have had with Nancy. I mean, and some of that, if it's a Savannah Guthrie stalker, maybe they're talking about Savannah. But what else could have the dialogue been? So maybe a stalker, but the only other way I think there'd be dialogue is if it's someone in the family or knowing the family, right? Maybe on behalf of the family if someone hired him, but that's all speculation, right? But I'm just trying to think, what other reasons would they have to even talk to her? I don't know. What are your theories, chat? Do you have any?
It could have been ordering her around. The reality is we don't know, but without more insight into what exactly happened inside the house, was furniture overturned, were things disturbed, the assumption is that they probably made entry, and that there was some sort of engagement, and then we see the blood. So that's not clear, exactly what caused that injury, but it could have been, an argument or dialogue that didn't result in full compliance, and then this abductor used force. But again, this is all surmising, but it's sometimes the things that are most simple, like this doesn't have to be. And this individual seemed like they came with a plan, but not like a perfect plan, not a rehearsed plan, not somebody that was deeply experienced in this, and probably not prepared, for the actual physical engagement that an abduction sometimes requires.
I mean, just trying to get in the mind of someone like this, if the person is somewhat obsessed with Savannah, would that make them not want to hurt her mom, or is it actually the opposite?
It's hard to surmise, but if there is,
I mean, what would the goal of someone who's obsessed with Savannah, what would the goal be to abduct Nancy? To get Savannah to come to them in some form? I'm just trying to think what would be the reasoning. Why wouldn't you want to come after Savannah? If you're obsessed with Savannah, what would going after Nancy do? I don't know. I don't know what the motive would be there.
Sort of an erotomania, like a unilateral, kind of affection or emotional connection, that there'll be a lot of assumptions by the abductor that Savannah's mother would be trying to catch up with, right? And all these kind of facts and beliefs and thoughts and experiences that this person is unilaterally experiencing, and maybe trying to convince her of, maybe trying to remind her of. And so we don't know, but with how it was done does suggest to me that there was sort of this emotional connection before arriving. It doesn't look like a burglary, right? It doesn't look like this was random, that
I agree. I don't think this was a burglary, and I don't think it was random. But I don't think the stalking angle is the right angle. I think a punishment/revenge angle, I could see that. But stalking of Savannah, I'm not sure I buy that. But while you're here, please remember to like the video. Likes are free. like for my spirit animal, the fox, and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Also to note, I don't like talking smack about any kinds of YouTubers, and I do my best to not do that, just so you know. Now, I'll describe certain people's behavior, like I have with Sheriff Nanos. I think that's a little bit different, but it's important to me to not talk trash.
This person knew her and perhaps Savannah in advance of this.
Yeah, and now we know that, you know, this person was there before because one of the surveillance photos is from a previous day. And we don't have any information that it was a burglary or that anything was even taken, you know, that there's been that hasn't come out. What you were saying, though, can you explain a little more when you said that he would be trying to convince the mother of things? Like, what did you mean by that?
Well, for instance, they come in and like, I am so-and-so. Like, I want this. My reason for being here is this. And her being in disbelief. Like, well, you get out. You know, I don't know you. You're a stranger. And he was like, you know, and whatever that might be for him to be sharing, convincing, or forcing acknowledgement of something that only he knew and she would not have been aware of before. And, you know, it's hard to make any assumptions about that dialogue, but what we can kind of surmise is that there was probably a very different vantage point of.
So, Tony, my other spirit animal is an owl, by the way. A very wise owl.
Of facts, right? And he's living in some different reality about what has taken place and probably trying to convince, berate, or explain his actions in some way to further her compliance. And because that 41 minutes, you know, it could be that, or he could have come in immediately and done something to force her, maybe affect her consciousness, and the 40 minutes is then preparing, you know, to make some kind of movement, because it's not clear how she was transported from there. And you know, that would be hard to believe that was all done on foot, that there wasn't some sort of vehicle nearby. But the reality is it's hard to move someone unconscious, you know, even in perfect scenarios, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the fact that she's immobile, or not immobile, but, you know, has mobility issues. I wonder, and we don't know this, but I'm just thinking back to this idea that it could be someone obsessed with Savannah. Like if items were taken that belong to Savannah or pictures of Savannah, that kind of thing.
We got a super chat here from Anne. Thank you so much for this, Anne. Thanks for the consistent effort you put into catching us up on what's happening each day. It is my pleasure to speak to you all, Anne, every night. I actually look forward to it. I look forward to it, chatting with everyone. And I also love to see the connections that people make with one another. So when Danielle has a surgery, or it's Bethany's birthday, or Bella's brother is having open heart surgery, I love to see the people supporting one another. That's pretty cool. So I like to see the flock of black sheep supporting one another. And I love it also when people like Anne send super chats like this, which is also very helpful. So, but anyway, people can support the channel. I really appreciate. So thank you again, Anne.
It would be interesting to know.
Yes. And, you know, again, this might require additional kind of reviewing of that. But we have to sort of believe that investigators have covered that. But initially, it seems like there was a little confusion as to the depth and severity of this abduction on the initial police response. That and that potentially disturbing things, or not recognizing that maybe something very, very obscure having been taken. But the reality is it doesn't have to. I mean, literally, it's clear that he has taken, you know, Miss Guthrie, that another artifact might not have been of any interest.
With your history as a hostage negotiator, Do you think Savannah will continue to have this sort of like sympathetic tone? Is there a point where does it ever work to be more, not aggressive, but, you know, like return my mom right now kind of thing?
I don't think so. You know, in my experience, it really is trying to create the safest opportunity for someone to really recognize the humanity and that impact, and really humanitizing herself, personalizing herself. But the reality is, as I've said, it's just so difficult, so painful to to do this, and it usually relies on a lot of support. It's really just very hard, even for somebody that has been involved in television and speaking to cameras. You cannot fully appreciate how difficult this is for her, but necessary, and potentially what makes the difference.
Yeah, gosh, that's a lot of pressure for her. I mean, I can't even imagine what it must be like for her knowing this could have something to do with her career and her fame. That's got to be hard.
Yes, I mean, and we see this so often with victims and survivors, them looking internally. And the reality is that, that this is something that happened to Savannah and her mother. And their family. This is not something that they've caused, but the way forward is to deeply humanize themselves and continue to communicate in ways that are very empathetic and try to shake loose some kind of communication. And of course, as in any hostage negotiation, we're really looking for some kind of engagement and then, of course, proof of life.
Yeah, which there hasn't been any proof of life, which is one.
There's been no even hint of a proof of life, right? And I mean, I don't even think any of those ransom notes were real at this point. I mean, one of them was asking for $6 million, but I'm very doubtful any of them were real at this rate. But either way, there's never even been a sniff of, oh, here's a proof of life. So
one thing I've wondered about, I mean, with these letters that went to TMZ that were never really authenticated, wouldn't there typically be a proof of life?
Yes, that's a great question by Brian. Thank you very much for this super chat, the real Emily Ross. I don't think it was random or a burglary. This case is just weird. I agree on both counts. I don't think it was a burglary, and I definitely think it's weird as well, because the motivation seems weird, right? The motivation of, I think, a punishment or revenge against Savannah Guthrie, that's a weird motivation. But as I've been saying also, just like the attempted assassination of Reagan, the motive behind that was to impress Jodie Foster. So I don't think we can rule out an off-the-wall motive in this case either, that if we do figure it out, it could be insane. It could be really weird. Like, what? It would, in other words, when you hear someone attempts to assassinate Reagan, who's going to even think, oh, it's to impress Jodie Foster? No one's going to think that, right? So, but again, thank you very much for the super chat.
Yes, well, my sense is, and I think they've run those down as all being hoax. That's kind of a reality of today. Not just that we have elderly being targeted, but that we've got a population that thinks this is an opportunity to prank and have their own kind of moment, and it's very unfortunate. If anybody with any consciousness can deeply, deeply appreciate how hard this is, and that wouldn't want any family to go through this, and for it to be prolonged like this, any kind of hostage situation, it really does amplify the pain and the trauma for loved ones.
Some people have questioned why Savannah hasn't been out and about more, helping search, outside the house. I mean, with other stories, we've seen families come out and be very sort of like out front.
And again, maybe it's dangerous for Savannah to be doing that. Maybe some of the goal is to get her out there. If the goal is also revenge punishment for Savannah, that would be a double whammy, wouldn't it? First take her mother and then come for her when she's out there. Now, granted, it'd be really difficult to get away with anything, right? Considering all the eyeballs in the area. But still, it could still be dangerous for her.
Do you think she could be in danger? I mean, I was just thinking if I were in her shoes, I would probably be, when you've got kids and you don't know who took your mom and it could be a crazy obsessed person. I mean, if you were advising her, is that something you think she should be concerned about?
I think I don't know, but potentially, but I think that it's very consistent to limit her exposure and be very, very clear on her message. Because if you've got one message and you're talking to the world and you're hoping to reach one person, you don't want to confuse that. You don't want any other message being sent. And that's really hard, as much as she probably would like to. And that's her impulse. I'm sure she's being guided to allow that to be done by professionals and others. That they've got people in the field that are doing that. And that the best and most important thing she can be doing is taking care of herself, her family, and being very clear and consistent in her own message.
Is there anything else with her videos that has stood out to you? Considering you worked these kinds of situations, that you were like, oh, that's definitely something that they're trying to, portray?
Well, I mean, this is just my personal vantage point as a general consumer. I've seen Savannah primarily, on set and in the sort of social places where you would expect to see somebody with celebrity. And it is markedly different that you're seeing, very much the raw version of Savannah. This is her very personally. This is who she is, and I think that one is just the reality of who she is, and two, I think it is important.
Now, one thing I would like to see Ashley Banfield follow up on is, okay, Ashley, you said Tommaso was a suspect. And since you said that, the sheriff cleared family, including spouses. But okay, Ashley, what is your source in law enforcement saying now? I would like to hear a follow-up on that. I would like to hear a follow-up on Annie's car being impounded. I would like to hear a follow-up on that Range Rover that was taken. There's other follow-ups I would like to see too. I would like to follow up on how they are with the footage from the other Nest cams.
Because it is deeply authentic, and it is not curated in a way that's made for broadcast television. And I think it's important to be doing that. That when we're guiding a family and loved ones through a process like this, the reality is you're really trying to get to the core of someone is and communicate that. And that is the best practice and most effective way of bringing loved ones home.
And I was telling you, she reportedly wanted to do the $1 million reward very early on, like in the first couple of days. And I think it was likely the sheriff at that point, because the FBI wasn't that involved. But we know that it was law enforcement who said, now is not the time. It'll overwhelm the tip line. Do you think that was a mistake for them to tell her that? Because I just wonder, would that have made a difference in the very early stages?
I don't think so. I think it's the right guidance and consistent with what I would have done in a similar case. That there is a sequence, and when you've got robust tip traffic and you've got the public engaged, that I don't think you need to tickle it any further. But I think this is important at this stage, and it feels right. So no, I don't. I'm not seeing this as a mistake. I'm seeing this as consistent with a sequence of continuing to do best practice in this investigation, particularly as it relates to supporting and guiding Savannah and her family.
So we've seen several videos, and now the $1 million reward. You talk about a sequence. I mean, what happens next? Like, what if another week, another 2 weeks go by, and we're in the same spot? What comes next?
Well, I think it would show patience and discipline in our own part for not really speculating. I want to be hopeful that, and I want Savannah and her family, and I want everyone who is watching this, and anybody that's feeling anxious about this case and hopeful about it, to continue to feel hopeful, and implore the public, if they have something useful, if they have anything that could be insightful, if they have video from any prior events, that they make those available to law enforcement. It's very hard for law enforcement to come to you if they don't know you have it. But if you know you have something, make that available. And I'm hopeful that these coming days and week, that there will be additional clues. And then it's just the hard work of analyzing that. And that takes time. And I think in some ways, with the immediate pressure off, it does allow investigators to be way more thorough and connect dots in ways that can break cases. So, and again, I'm somebody who sat with families through this, and so I wouldn't even want to speculate. I want to say that this is the right thing to be doing right now, and I'm hopeful that this will continue to provide information that will lead toward this, the safe recovery of Miss Guthrie.
In the hostage cases you've worked, have they ever gone on this long? We were 3+ weeks.
Yes. I mean, we've had hostage takings that have gone on years.
And that's interesting, right? We know about Elizabeth Smart, but I want to hear about the cases that he's run and how they ended.
In the Middle East, in the Philippines, David Rhodes, a New York Times reporter, was held for over 9 months.
Yeah. Ever with no communication, though? Ever like with
spotty, with inconsistent, and with big blackout periods, and there were many, many reasons for that, as we do kind of the debrief of many of those cases. Sometimes it was the security of the abductor. Often it was the, loss of communication because of things that could have happened in any circumstances, satellite batteries going down, just the inability to communicate, and then falling back to letter writing through third-party intermediaries. So we've really seen it all. And the important thing is not to kind of prejudge any of it, and continue to be very, very open and diverse in your thought, and not fall into groupthink, and not hurry past things, and not be pressured due to whether it be media inquiry or many of the other things that might influence the use of resources, the attention or scrutiny on law enforcement, and being very, very consistent in your message.
And just my last question, if, she's obviously trying to be sympathetic to whoever this is and establish that.
And yeah, I don't think money was the motive for this murder. I don't think it was for a murder, for this kidnapping, for this ransom. No, I don't think that's what it was. I think punishment or revenge against Savannah. I think that's what it was.
Line of communication. If the person does open up a line of communication, is there, when you were in this line of work, is there any promises that can be made to that person so that they would cooperate? Because obviously they're probably thinking, why am I going to talk now? I don't want to, go to jail for the rest of my life, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, often the dialogue reveals what the interest of the abductor or the kidnapper wants. And particularly when it's an emotional connection, it does open a variety of opportunities that might be satisfied. These often are not just about money. And having negotiated many, and with very, very high success, that once dialogue.
And if this was about money, they really blundered it, in my opinion. And because they've gotten no money, right? Now, some people were saying, well, maybe it was for money. They just messed it up. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think they messed it up that bad. I don't think that was the goal. There's other ways to get money than to go through this free-for-all, right? Think about this. Of all the ways you want to make money, you're going to do it by kidnapping Nancy Guthrie? Really? This doesn't seem to add up to me.
Is created and proof of life established, that there is a very, very high likelihood of safe release.
Like they may just want to talk to Savannah or have some kind of relation. I mean, it sounds kind of weird to say, but have some kind of relationship with Savannah that maybe could be worked out temporarily or something.
Yes, or a statement to the world, or something that a grievance that they want aired. Again, everything is there's the potential for everything, and that contact and that initial engagement will reveal.
The first video was with all the siblings, and then we saw one with the brother, but now it's mostly just only been Savannah. Do you think that's by design? Does that lead us to even more to believe that this is someone obsessed with Savannah?
Yeah, that's a good question by Brian, especially considering the topic of the conversation here.
Well, I don't think we can make the assumption that the investigators know. There is that potential, but the reality is that it's very important to narrow the messenger and make that very consistent. And because she is so public, as opposed to some of the other family members, I think it's important to go with that theme and maintain it. And you don't want to be crossing messages. And so much about communication is way more than just words. It's body language. It is all the nonverbals that go into this. And you're trying to communicate that, right? Through a single conversation. And so I think that the guidance that they're getting to narrow the kind of credible and most effective messenger for this moment is probably makes a lot of sense.
Appreciate Phil for talking with me, and I'll be in touch with him. And I think a lot of what he said is really interesting to think about. What else happened today that I wanted to tell you about? Also interesting, there's apparently some ordinance that was now passed. They're trying to boot the media out of the neighborhood where Nancy lives. We've been set up on the street where I'm sitting right now. They closed one lane. They brought the Department of Transportation in to put these barricades down. And I don't think we've really caused any problems from what I can tell. And a lot of the neighbors who I have met have said, like, we're glad you're here. We don't want people to forget about Nancy. If you leave, we feel like the story will go away. But anyway, they've now said that we all have to be out by tomorrow, that you're not allowed to have cars parked anywhere in this entire neighborhood. They created this zone. And if you do, I think it's a $250 fine. And basically you can't park here anymore. So I don't know what we're going to do moving forward. We're trying to sort that out right now. Are we going to just not have a car here and get dropped off and just sort of, if we can still have a tent because it's so hot and it's so sunny? So we're going to have to wait and see, but it seems like they just are sick of the media. And again, it's interesting because the neighbors that I'm talking to, and maybe they're just the nice ones who like us, but don't seem to have that sentiment at all. But they want us to leave the authorities. And they're now making it kind of impossible for us to stay. And you guys remember when I covered like Abby Petito, we rented a place from the neighbors in their lawn. I don't really think that's a possibility here, just the way the neighborhood is set up. So I don't think that's going to be an option. And I don't want to leave the house just because that's where a lot of the activity is. And again, our intention is to keep the story alive and not move on. So we'll have to see how we're going to sort that out tomorrow, but I'll keep you guys posted. Appreciate you guys for watching and all your support. I'll talk to you guys later.
That's our favorite Brian Etten. Make sure you check out his channel, like his videos, watch his content, subscribe to his channel. Like my video here, if you haven't already. Likes are free. Likes are for my spirit animals, the fox and the owl, my two favorite animals. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Now, what are they going to do now? It sounds like the Sheriff Nanos and friends, they just don't want media there at all. It sounds like the media is annoying Sheriff Nanos. I mean, especially since he makes his big announcements whenever Ashley Banfield or Brian Etten say something. He goes out of his way to contradict it. And he's probably thinking to himself, you know what? I don't want these people here at all. I kind of think he's being a little bit selfish about it as well, especially since he doesn't want the volunteer groups trying to help. It's like, what do you have to lose, Sheriff Nanos? What results are you producing right now? None. So what do you have to lose? What are the cons? But now we're going to go to this new person. I'm curious what you all think of this person. But she has a video about this case. I didn't watch it, full disclosure. But let's see.
Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today's Show co-host Savannah.
And this is Lawyer Lee. And again, full disclosure, I did not watch this video, so we're going to watch it for the first time together and see what we think about it.
Savannah Guthrie has now been missing for 3 full weeks. This is one of the most heavily covered missing persons cases I can remember in our country. And yet, law enforcement still has not found Nancy, and they still haven't made an arrest. They have not even publicly identified a suspect yet. And the further we get into this case, the deeper we dive into it, the more things we find that simply don't make sense. They don't add up. Today, I want to walk through 6 of those. For 3 of these, I think I can actually explain those. They look suspicious at first glance, but when you understand the law behind them, they make a lot more sense. But for the other 3, I personally am still struggling with these. I'm going to ask you what you think, because I think it doesn't make sense. We're going to start with the 3 that at least have some legal explanation behind.
Because again, also, when you want the media gone, what does that sub-communicate? It kind of sub-communicates you don't want more eyeballs in the case, right? Because when you make it harder for media to be there, some are going to leave, which means fewer eyeballs in the case. If you're Sheriff Nanos, why would you ever want fewer eyeballs on the case? Especially since we've talked about his ego / narcissistic side, you would think he'd want the opposite, right? And I'd say, well, that speaks to me like someone that doesn't really have anything going for him. And the more eyeballs on him, giving him the kind of attention he doesn't like, okay, Nanos, you screwed this up. He doesn't like that. And I should make a clarification. I've said before, narcissistic people like both positive and negative attention. They like negative attention when they're provoking people into negative reactions and making them angry. That makes them feel powerful. They push someone off of their emotional center. But they don't like the negative attention that Sheriff Nanos is probably getting right now, that people are calling him incompetent, and Sheriff Nanos is not in control of this narrative. They don't like that kind of attention. They only like the kind of attention that they can spin it in a way that makes them feel powerful or good, right? So when they make someone really angry, oh yeah, that can make them feel good because they're in control of it. But this kind of negative attention, no, they don't like it. So the fact that he's making everyone go away, to me, means he doesn't want any more of this negative spotlight, because so many people are saying Sheriff Nanos blew this, right? No suspects, no closer to finding her. So he doesn't want the media there to be reporting on that. Makes him look bad. So he says, you know what? Get the hell out of here, media. And hopefully people will forget about this for a while. That's what those actions sub-communicate to me. But do you agree with me?
Number one, the DNA seems to make no sense. You do not have to be a true crime fan to know that DNA testing is the gold standard of law enforcement investigations, because it is so precise. It can find the exact person, the exact DNA. But of course, you have to find DNA, and you have to find a sufficient amount. You might think that would be really hard to do in this case. We saw the Ring camera video of the man at Nancy Guthrie's door, and the man's wearing gloves. He seems to be covered from head to toe, except for a little bit of his mouth, a little bit of his eyes. How is DNA going to be even left at the scene? But we do know that police got a lucky break. They did find gloves about 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home that looked like the ones the man in the video was wearing.
And so we know, I never really had much hope for those gloves, and there's been no matches with those gloves. I wasn't expecting there to be anyway, but this video is from a few days ago, so.
The person who was wearing those would have had to put them on, and maybe there was some touch DNA, or maybe inside the gloves there was touch DNA, so that there was some kind of transfer. It seems like perfect evidence, but no one's been arrested. There are a couple of reasons why. The first problem is that those gloves may not actually be connected to the scene. They were found 2 miles away. And of course, there must be 1,000 reasons to use gloves like that, most of which are completely legitimate. Here's what the sheriff posted on X. DNA evidence from gloves found approximately 2 miles from Nancy Guthrie's residence was submitted to CODIS.
All right, so lawyer Lee, I like her so far. She's on the money. She gets it.
Talk about that in just a minute. And produced no matches. There is additional DNA evidence that was found at the residence that is also being analyzed. He also posted the DNA that was submitted to CODIS was from the set of gloves found 2 miles away. It did not trigger a match in CODIS and did not match DNA found at the property. The DNA found at the property is being analyzed, and further testing needs to be done as part of the investigation. The good news is it sounds like there's even more DNA in the house. It doesn't match the gloves, but it would be incredibly important evidence. Now let's talk about the second problem with this evidence. The DNA that they found only helps if they are able to match it to a person. Law enforcement does not have a DNA database that covers DNA of every single person in the country or the world. So what they do is compare what they have found to CODIS, which is the FBI's combined DNA index system. It has a very limited number of people, only known offenders. In other words, if someone is convicted federally, then they are DNA sampled and their DNA is put into CODIS. Plus, all 50 states participate. But this is just people convicted of a crime. In some situations, it might be people arrested, but it didn't work in this case. There's not a known prior offender who has been connected to the DNA that they found. Now, the next step will be genetic genealogy. Let's talk about what that means. It was done in the Brian Kohberger case. It's where DNA databases have been compiled by people submitting their DNA for testing because they want to learn more about their ancestors and who they are, something like Ancestry.com. Law enforcement might get lucky enough to find a DNA match. If someone's family member, cousin, sister, brother, parent had submitted DNA to one of these databases, they might realize that the DNA is so close that they could look at just the very closest relatives of that person where they would find a match. It's definitely going to be used in this case. And I say that because of what the sheriff told Fox.
So you learn from the chat about those gloves found 2 miles from the home. There are many factories in the Tucson area. Many factories use those kinds of gloves. Yeah, so that would certainly diminish the possibility that it's connected to the case, right? Thank you, Dana.
Tim reporter Justin Lum. Justin Lum was interviewing Sheriff Nanos and asked, do you go the genetic genealogy route? Sheriff Nanos said, well, absolutely you do that, but we have other DNA evidence from the scene that is more critical to me than something found 2 miles away. So he's saying, I'm more interested in what was found in the home than the gloves, but yes, we're going to do genetic genealogy. But there is a huge problem with using genetic genealogy. The largest DNA databases, including Ancestry.com, say that law enforcement is not allowed to use the DNA.
Okay. And this is what Cece was saying the other day. She's the genealogy expert. The top three, 23andMe, Ancestry.com, and the other one, they do not cooperate with law enforcement. That's an issue that gets in the way of genetic genealogy. She's also very correct that the stuff in the house is more important. But since this video was made, we have learned that the DNA from the house is not viable. Partial sample. They couldn't even submit it to CODIS. Now, I think that also means you can't really do too much with the genetic genealogy with that because it's not a good sample. So if it's not a good sample, what do? They should have gotten a good sample, though, before they closed that stupid crime scene. We saw the foliage in the blood. There should have been something there. Saliva, touch DNA, something. So, I mean, without DNA in the house, I don't even know what to look forward to in terms of solving the case.
Submissions that people have made. Now, why? Well, one reason might be that people might not use Ancestry.com or 23andMe, some of those other types of places where you could send off your DNA. People might not use them if they knew law enforcement could access the information. The Department of Justice has a policy that the federal law enforcement cannot use genetic data from a database.
So the way they were able to submit the glove to CODIS is there was clear DNA on it. All right, there was a good sample of DNA. The sample was just useless because there was no match. And plus, it was the glove from 2 miles away, so it was just the chances it was relevant to the case were slim to none. And the fact they made a big deal out of that, like, proves to me they're grasping at straws.
It says law enforcement is not allowed to use it. Here's the exact quote. Investigative agencies shall identify themselves as law enforcement to GG, Genetic Genealogy Services, and enter and search FGG profiles only in those genetic genealogy services that provide explicit notice to their service users and the public that law enforcement may use their service sites to investigate crimes or to identify unidentified human remains. So in other words, the Department of Justice has told law enforcement, if you are told this database is off limits to you, then you can't use it. You aren't allowed to look in that database to find a match. There are some that will allow law enforcement, but if the specific database says you can't, you aren't allowed to use this, then they're supposed to not do it. In the Brian Kohberger case, this became a huge issue. The defense claimed that the FBI had just blatantly ignored that rule and used databases, even though they were not supposed to do that. The defense said, what you ought to do, Judge, is keep the government from using this DNA evidence at all, which would have thrown out the most important evidence in the Kohberger case, which was the DNA on the knife sheath. The judge decided he was going to let the DNA evidence in. Kohberger took a plea, so we never got an appellate court testing that issue. It's really not.
So that's a good point by OC there, is that Brian Kohberger was caught not because of the CODIS match, but because his dad used Ancestry. But in order for that to be the case, you need DNA that's actually relevant, right? And that's what we haven't found so far. That partial sample is not going to cut it. Now, they can have whatever from that glove, but if the glove's not related to the crime scene, then that's not going to help you.
Known exactly what the courts will do. It isn't decided yet. So the real risk to law enforcement is it's not enough to figure out that there's a DNA match. It would be catastrophic if they figured that out and then that critically important evidence got ruled out. They also have to do it in a way where the judge is going to say, yes, I'm going to let you use this at trial. They have to be very careful. One interesting note, Sheriff Nanos has been pretty heavily criticized for sending the DNA to a private lab in Florida instead of giving it to the FBI to analyze. But there's one thing nobody is thinking about, which is there could actually be an advantage to using that Florida lab.
I don't really have a problem with him using that lab. I mean, even Jennifer Koffendorfer and Maureen didn't have a problem with that. I think the people that used to work with Sheriff Nanos, they were just chomping at the bit to criticize him for more. So that's why they did that. But in terms of this case, I don't think that aspect has hurt anything because a not viable sample is not a viable sample regardless of where you send it, whether you send it to a private lab or the place in Quantico, right? That's how I see it. It's not until you get a good DNA sample does it matter.
For genetic genealogy, because the FBI is governed by the DOJ policy, but it's not really clear that those rules are going to apply to a lab in Florida that's not connected. So if they run the genetic genealogy through them, it might be less problematic for them. The DNA looks like something that doesn't make sense, but when you look at the law behind it, a lot of what you can see going on does kind of make sense. It may be just a matter of time until they actually get some hits. The third thing I think that doesn't make sense, that's kind of something we can explain is the entire matter of the Tommaso Cioni. Early on, journalist Ashley Banfield said a private source.
She's asking the very thing I was just talking about. But before she gets into that, please remember to like the video. Likes are free. Like for my spirit animals, the owl and the fox. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And come say hello to the awesome flock of black sheep in the live chat here. We're a very welcoming group. Lots of good vibes.
Was telling her that law enforcement had suspicions about Cioni, the son-in-law who's married to Annie Guthrie, one of Nancy's 3 children. Now, that's not really entirely unlikely. It's not, frankly, even all that surprising because law enforcement always considers the family. He was the very last person to have seen Nancy Guthrie alive, other than whoever took her. So it would make sense that they would at least be considering that. But things really heated up around Cioni because law enforcement appeared to be kind of doubling down on investigating him. They searched his home and then canvassed in the neighborhood on February 5th. And then on February 7th, they did another search at the home. Law enforcement that time was in the home for several hours. They took photos and they left with a bag, and a sheriff's deputy was seen even wearing blue latex gloves to be careful not to contaminate the scene. That already seemed really odd, unless somehow Cioni was a suspect.
Yes, correct. And so Sheriff Nanos never confirmed that. In the beginning, he said, well, anyone could be a suspect. No one's off the table. Then several days later, he says, well, actually, the family is cleared, and that includes their spouses. So we never learned a word about what happened with that. We never learned a word about what they found in Annie's house. Remember that several weeks ago now? They were taking all those pictures in the house. The people came out with the blue gloves, like she just said. But what did it lead to? Nothing. Now, what you would also think is you got Annie's DNA and Tommaso's DNA. Wouldn't you definitely be trying to cross-examine that with the crime scene? The problem you might run into is, when's the last time Annie and Tommaso were there? For a real purpose, right? Before the crime. That's where it can get tricky. Because if they already were spending time there, wouldn't their DNA be there? So that's where it gets tough.
84-year-old Nancy Guthrie spent the evening with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law Tommaso Cioni. And around 9:48 p.m., Cioni drops Nancy Guthrie back off at her house. At 9:50, her garage door closes. So the fact that they're looking at the Cioni home means they must have thought there was some reason to do that. Did they think Nancy had been brought back there? Was there some reason to think she hadn't even gotten home that night, even though that appears to be what happened? Agents were actually seen carrying a silver briefcase into the home. They may have been looking at digital evidence from the family computers. So all told, there has been a lot of speculation around Cioni, even about his appearance. He has a mustache. So does the man at the front door. Although his is a little more salt and pepper than what you see in the man at the front door, but they might be about the same size. There's actually been a lot of debate about that, whether he's actually bigger or the same size as the man seen in the door cam video. The man in the video also seems to have kind of a softened chin, like maybe having a beard. Cioni has a beard. There was a lot of confusion when over the weekend the sheriff said, well, everyone's a suspect. And then on February 16th, put out this post on X. To be clear, the Guthrie family, to include all siblings and spouses, has been cleared as possible suspects in this case. The family has been nothing but cooperative and gracious and are victims in this case. To suggest otherwise is not only wrong, it's cruel. The Guthrie family are victims, plain and simple.
That's the line there that really makes me think Sheriff Nanos was being antagonistic. To suggest otherwise is not only wrong, it is cruel. So basically what he's saying is, Ashley Banfield, you are wrong and cruel is what he's saying there. There's no reason for him to say that. Ashley Banfield's just doing her job. Her law enforcement source is not going to lie to her. So why are you trying to make her look ridiculous for no reason? That's what I would say.
Please, I'm begging you, the media, to honor your profession and report with some sense of compassion and professionalism. Why would the sheriff's office investigate Sione so much if it appears he didn't do it? I think there are actual legal explanations for that. In a 1995 case called Kyles v. Whitley, the U.S. Supreme Court said a defendant is entitled to present evidence that the police investigation was incomplete or flawed. So let's say law enforcement eventually finds somebody they believe committed the crime. That defendant could argue to the jury that the police failed to pursue leads, that they should have looked harder. They just fixated on this new person, the person who is arrested ultimately, when they should have been considering whether other people might have committed the crime. So by investigating Sione, law enforcement can legitimately say, we investigated thoroughly. We looked as hard as we could. We even looked at the idea that family members were involved, and they're not. Now I want to get to the three things about this case that I just can't make sense of. Tell me your thoughts in the comments, because I don't know. I'm trying to figure them out, but these are things that just don't seem to fit. Number 4, the timing to me makes no sense. According to a timeline released by the sheriff's office, there was a 40-minute gap between when Nancy Guthrie's doorbell was disconnected and when her pacemaker app disconnected from her phone, which you would think might mean she was being taken away from the property. Around 9:48 p.m., Sione drops Nancy Guthrie back off at her house. At 9:50, her garage door closes. Now, what happens after that is kind of like a feverish nightmare where terrifying moments come briefly into bright focus, and then we go back into darkness, and we never really get a full picture. Here's what the sheriff said in a press conference.
Early morning at 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera disconnects. At 2:12 a.m., software detects a person on a camera, but there's no video available. They had no subscription, and therefore it would rewrite itself. It just kind of loops, right? It covers up. That's what our analysis teams have told us. We're not done with that. We'll do all we can, but that's what it says. So that detects a person on camera. Could that be an animal? I imagine that's possible. We don't know that. We just have no video, but we're not giving up on that. 2:20, Nancy's pacemaker app shows that it was a disconnect from the phone.
When you get to thinking about the timeline, this is really bizarre. At 1:47, someone disconnects the doorbell camera at the house. The video wasn't saved yet. Somehow the FBI was able to recover it. At 2:12 a.m., something is detected on the camera at the house. It sounds like nothing was recovered there. Then another 16 minutes pass before Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker app disconnects from the phone at 2:28 p.m. So from the time that the camera was disconnected, the intruder was presumably inside the house for 40 minutes. That's a really long time. What was the person doing? If this was a kidnapping.
And again, to clarify, doesn't mean he was in there for 41 minutes. He might have only been there for 5 to 10 minutes. We don't know. That gap doesn't tell us as much as some people have implied it does.
This is just strange. I mean, how long could it take for a burly man to subdue an 84-year-old woman in fragile health? If this was a kidnapping, wouldn't it make more sense to quickly grab the victim and hightail it out of there? And if it's not a kidnapping, then why are they there? Let's say it was a burglary. 40 minutes is still a very long time to be in a home. To me, the whole length of time is very odd, and I can't explain that. If you have a theory, please let me know in the comments. Now, the fifth thing that to me doesn't make sense is the sheriff's adamant refusal to say whether there was forced entry at Nancy Guthrie's home that night. Why? Why not just tell us that? Yet the sheriff has very firmly refused to answer that. He told Justin Lum, I'm not going to get into the entry of the home or forced entry or any of that. What I'll tell you is I believe, just as I had initially, that Nancy was removed from that home against her will. She was kidnapped, and we still believe that.
So why wouldn't Sheriff Nanos go on about that? Because as far as we know, we saw the front door. Did there look like there was any signs of forced entry? Did it look like there's any signs of forced entry in the back? Although we haven't seen the back. The garage door? No. So if there's no signs of forced entry, what does that mean? Especially if Sheriff Nanos is not going to confirm there are no signs of forced entry. Why wouldn't he? Why is he making a stand about that? What's he trying to protect? What does he think is going to happen if he tells us? I don't know.
Here's what the sheriff said at a press conference.
Someone had mentioned there was forced entry. I have no clue where that comes. We have been very consistent. We are not discussing that at all. Whether it's forced entry or not forced entry, that is something we're just not discussing.
But why though? Like when you don't discuss something like that, it makes people jump to conclusions. It makes people guess. And why do you want people guessing? Guessing is not going to help people solve the case. I mean, are you trying to protect knowledge that you think is going to hurt the case if it's out somehow? I don't see how knowing this would help or not help. The only thing I can think of is, well, if it's not forced entry, people are going to think, well, it must be related to the family, right? Because how else would they get in without forced entry? And maybe he doesn't want people to believe that for some reason.
I don't know where anybody got that information. Sunday morning.
It just seems like an odd thing for the sheriff to take a stand on. It seems like there's kind of one obvious answer, and it's not all that important. So the fact that he won't talk about that makes you think, well, maybe there's something out of the ordinary about that. Maybe for some reason there really was no forced entry. If that's the case, then did Nancy leave the door unlocked that night? Or did the person have a key? Or did someone tamper with the door in advance so that it wouldn't lock? They may be holding back, the sheriff's office may be, in case someone comes forward. That way law enforcement can verify that they actually know the truth about how the people entered the home. But it's just one of the things that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, the last point is number 6, the idea that Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped makes no sense to me. When you think about the exchange, the kidnapper wants to control the victim until the very last minute. They don't want to be caught. The victim's family wants to be sure they get the person back alive. They don't want the victim to be hurt. Awkward, very difficult situations. Usually, the kidnapper would contact the family privately. Come alone, don't bring the police. And instead, the person demanding Bitcoin in this case sent the demand to the media, which would be absolute maximum public attention. When you have that kind of public attention, how is it ever going to work to make the transfer? You can imagine copters and drones hovering over this as there's an attempt to make this exchange. Also, apparently, they have not provided proof that Nancy Guthrie is alive. And if the kidnappers don't do that, why would the family ever pay? Why would they ever think that whoever is making the demand actually has her? None of it seems to really fit with this being a kidnapping. And if it is a kidnapping, it seems really inept. So if you can think of how this makes sense, please let me know in the comments below. We'll keep following the case. I hope they will find Nancy Guthrie soon and that she is completely healthy.
Well, the thing is, like we mentioned yesterday, maybe these guys were so professional, they did their best to make it look like it wasn't professional. We went over this as a possibility. They're playing chess. We'll leave some foliage, but we won't leave any DNA. So they said the crime scene was messy, didn't look like someone that was a professional, but maybe that was part of the game. Maybe they're playing chess. I don't know.
I hope they catch whoever did this. Be sure to like and subscribe as we follow this case, hopefully to the conclusion where Nancy Guthrie is found alive.
All right. So that's Lawyer Lee there. I like Lawyer Lee. I think she's pretty good there. We might add her to the rotation when she makes more videos about cases we're covering. But see, like, there's so many loopholes and questions here. We just don't even know. There's so many things we don't know. They could still be withholding information that could completely change how we see the entire thing. But I like Lawyer Lee. I do. But yes, please remember to like the video. Likes are free. Like for my spirit animals, the fox and the owl. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Go live every night around 10 p.m. Eastern to talk about true crime and current events. I use my experience with mental health addiction and narcissistic abuse to give my own unique perspective on it. And there's an awesome flock of black sheep here in the comments. So many things are unknown, it's frustrating. And now Sheriff Nanos wants the media gone. That means to me they're not anywhere close to finding anyone, and they don't want any more of the negative criticism. That's what I think. Wide Awake is here. Welcome, Wide Awake. Black Sheep Gang, Johnny. That's what they call us. Yeah, she's a good lawyer. I kind of like James Sexton, the divorce lawyer, too. There's other lawyers I like as well. The criminal guy. What's that guy's name? The criminal guy? Bruce Rivers, the criminal guy. I like him. R.I.P. to his son as well. So tonight we went over Nick Reiner and his not guilty plea. We'll see how that turns out. April 29th is his next court date. There will probably be very little news about it between now and then. In terms of the Nancy Guthrie case, I think they're running low on leads. They're running low on anything relevant to the case. And so what are they going to do? I don't think there's much they can do at this point. And it might fall into the back of people's minds here, especially if another story comes up in a minute. Oh my goodness. First time commenting by Nikki. Like my content. That is awesome. Everyone welcome Nikki. Nikki Todd, 3069. Perhaps another addition to our flock of black sheep. I love it. Nanos didn't kick them out. The county commission did. Well, do you think Sheriff Nanos might have recommended it to the county commissioner? That's possible too, right? Either way, they're making it harder for the media to do their jobs. That goes without saying. Now, the only excuse you could tell, what if neighbors don't like them there? Well, Brian Etten said most neighbors did like them there. But like he said also, maybe the ones that don't like them there just don't talk to them. That's our only hope, Tony, is that they have things they haven't said. But in terms of the things they did say, why would they make a big deal out of that glove that was found 2 miles from the home, especially when there's so many similar gloves to that? Why get anyone's hopes up about that? Doesn't make sense. You got it, Patrice. I'm glad you were here. It's about time to wrap the show up here as well because there's not much else to say. Yes, that is true, James. I think the other side could use a little more of that too, though. But hope, I think, is running slim. As Annie Guthrie said, they're blowing on the embers of hope. Well, crowd, there's no better time than now to start. But I'll tell you, it can take a long time to develop a successful YouTube channel. It can take years. I mean, I've been on YouTube a long time. Oh, the real Emily Ross, super chat. Thank you. I heard Nancy had a high since hearing aid and could have taken it out before bed. Had a high. What does that mean? So wouldn't hear anything, all speculation. So if she was not very good of hearing, she was hard of hearing, yeah, she wouldn't hear much for sure. And then they could sneak up. But again, how would they get in? No signs of forced entry. How do they get in? The back door, I think they said, was left open. But thank you for that super chat. Of course, Tony. Glad you enjoyed the show. So that does add variables. I mean, a lot of the elderly are definitely hard of hearing, right? You got it, Nikki. Welcome. I think so, Miss Kim. I think punishment, revenge, and I'd say it's 98, 99% chance that she's no longer with us at this point, which is sad to say. Whatever it is, it's not good. It's not looking good. That's I don't what is a high sense hearing aid, wide awake? I don't know what that is. Yeah, I mean they want closure, song bits, right? If you're Savannah Guthrie, Annie Guthrie, and Cameron Guthrie, you want closure. That's what the body does for you, because right now they're in limbo. They're in limbo of it's actually probably more torturous to be in limbo where you're not quite sure. Maybe she's passed, but maybe, just maybe, there's hope she's alive. And that's a torturous position to be in. The blowing on the embers of hope there. But again, if the goal was revenge or a punishment, that's what you want, unfortunately. Okay, so high sense is a brand of hearing aid. That makes sense. That makes sense. I'm 73 and damn right I'm hard of hearing. My grandmom is 96 and she is deaf in one ear, 40% hearing in the other. And she has a hearing aid. Of course she does, right? My. Thank you so much, Jared, and all the black sheep. Good night, everybody. Well said, my. We'll have to see what's on the docket for tomorrow night. We went over our Nick Reiner docket. She very well might have been completely asleep, wide awake. Completely asleep, wide awake. Yes, it does. It does. Bodies fall apart as we get older, right? I think what happened today at Nancy's was one of the family members came in. So maybe Annie, and they were in that black SUV and they went into the garage because they released the home to the family. It's not going to be a crime scene permanently, right? But that's got to be a scary place now. That probably gives them bad memories, right? It's kind of like if there's a murder in a home, what do? Do you sell the home? A lot of times you do. It's like that movie Sinister, right? Where you buy a home where tragedies have taken place. Some people won't. Some people won't do that because they think it's haunted. Michael, welcome. Good night from SoCal, Adam says. Glad SoCal is representing. I'm South Jersey. Yeah, there is no sign of life. We have gotten no closer to that. Michael, you remind me of this lawyer's advertisement I saw. It said, just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. No, not at all, Tony. But it does happen, right? People don't think about that. But imagine all the homes that a murder has been committed in. It's not like they demolish all the homes. People sell them. Oh, did you like that, Wide Awake, huh? That ad always stood out to me, the lawyer's ad. Just because you did it doesn't mean you're guilty. But that's another cool thing. I mean, not a cool thing, but an interesting thing. All the houses that crimes have been committed in, tragedies. That's kind of what the Overlook Hotel was all about in The Shining, right? Mr. Grady, Delbert Grady, killed his family, then himself. So it's the haunted Overlook Hotel. Belly laughter is priceless, Wide Awake. one of the things that helps in a way that therapy never could. Laughter. Laughter is the best medicine. Who wins if this goes too far? What's the definition of too far? Dr. Vanna, welcome to the flock of black sheep. How are you? Delbert Grady, they called him, Jensky. They killed the twins. The twins and the mother and then himself. I do believe in them too, and I've got some interesting picture evidence of some of them. Delbert Grady, I presume. But all right, everybody. That's really all I got for tonight. So we'll see. We'll see what happens between now and tomorrow night. Thank you very much for liking and subscribing. Appreciate that, Dr. Vanna. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I'm live every night around 10 p.m. Eastern to talk about true crime and current events. And I use my personal experience with addiction, mental health, being on the spectrum, narcissistic abuse, narcissistic family systems to give my unique perspective on true crime and current events. And the best of all, the flock of black sheep in the comments, in the live chat. I always want to say it's the comments, but it's really the live chat. Jack Torrance. Now, the book The Shining was pretty cool, but I did like the movie as well, even though it wasn't completely true to the book. Stanley Kubrick's a good director. I mean, Stanley Kubrick, Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, good films there, right? You have a good night, Michael. Dana, good night. Red Rum there, Jensky. Or Mr. Halloran, The Shining. And the part they don't say in the movie is it smells like burnt toast or oranges whenever you get a case of The Shining. And the cool thing about Stephen King is a lot of his books overlap. So if you listen to or read the Dark Tower series, it overlaps with Salem's Lot, Father Callahan, and Hearts in Atlantis. It's very interesting. The Stephen King universe intertwines. Like psych professors? I've interviewed psychologists. I don't know if I've ever interviewed a psych professor. You have a good night, Miss Kim. My night owlness is contagious. That's the other reason why my spirit animals are the fox and the owl. The night owl. Have a good night, Linda. May God bless you and yours as well. I like the book, Brenda, Hearts in Atlantis. That's why I have this. Just remember this from the book? Love plus peace equals information. Stephen King might know. Stephen King knows and was friends with Rob Reiner, you know. Stephen King's the one who wrote the book, Stand By Me. But all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Like the video on your way out if you didn't, and subscribe to the channel if you didn't already. Anthony Hopkins is one of my favorite actors. He did very good in Westworld, too. Liked him in Meet Joe Black, Silence of the Lambs, Westworld. Good guy. Right on, Dr. Vanna. I love it. But I hope to see you again here tomorrow night. Or more times moving forward. So, D, good night as well. 50 years below zero. My great-grandfather wrote it. I'll have to check that out, James. Have a good night, Tony. Have a good night, everybody. Till next time. I definitely will, Brenda.